good? Good evening.
Good evening.
7:33, coming to you live, school committee for September 9th, 2013. We'll start off with what I would call a medium-length agenda, but we'll see. We'll start off with the minutes. You've already gotten circulated the minutes from Dennis. We have both regular session and executive session from August 26th. For the regular session, can I have a motion to approve the minutes, please?
So moved.
Second.
I'll second.
Any discussion, question, comment?
I would, if I may. Not having been at last school committee meeting, took it upon myself to follow on the television the session. And the one issue, and I'm not sure what was decided, but I think time is marching on. I think that a ceremony, a thank you, an event in conjunction with the proposed opening use of the light field makes sense.
Yeah. We'll get to that at some
Good.
point. That's not, if you have anything specific on the minutes from the meeting, rather than kind of a feeling on that topic. Anything specific on the minutes, a correction, an addition, a mischaracterization, perhaps, something you want to add to it.
I would like to add that I think a ceremony would make sense for the opening session.
Okay. Just for future purposes, that's not relevant to the past minutes. We can talk about that topic when that comes up in the meeting this evening, but not really relevant to, but thank you.
Good.
Anything else on the minutes?
It's sort of in the minutes there. We've got a little bit notes. You're just saying for decision.
It is. Is there anything that's mischaracterized about that issue in the minutes?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, because that's kind of what we... If nothing else on the minutes, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Thank you. Executive session minutes from 8/26/13. Can I have a motion, please?
I'll make a motion to approve the executive session minutes from August 26th, 2013.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Communications, Donna, we received.
We did receive from Town Hall a selectman liaison assignments, and I left a copy as in place this evening. Actually, Mrs. Butler's here, she's going to be our liaison, but the other departments are there as well. Secondly, in the school committee email today, there was a letter from a parent who was interested in asking some questions about, ironically, technology, and particularly the use of iPads. And we're going to talk a bit about that during the meeting. I didn't include the copy because Derek and I were discussing it, and I think it went to the middle schools. But I will get you the specific letter and my response, but as well, I'll answer in a general way the questions that were asked as part of the technology presentation.
Thank you. I don't see our student here.
No,
Maybe next
no,
time.
We had all of the elections, yeah.
Right. Okay, questions and comments from the audience? Anything not on the agenda? No? Okay. Item 6 is what we're calling unfinished business as opposed to old business.
That was recommended when we had our most recent open meeting training,
Yeah.
was that was more appropriate than old business.
Mhm.
And in fact, in this case, it certainly is.
Yeah. So we started to talk about, so Andy was not here last time.
I was here, I just came 10 minutes late.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
And who else wasn't here? Right.
Yeah.
So what we were discussing was Dennis had expressed a desire to maybe move some of the meeting dates that we typically would hold based on kind of a personal schedule. We talked about perhaps trying to accommodate some of that, but clearly it's not able to accommodate, we're not able to accommodate all of it. And also we discussed the possibility of having our planning session that we had a year ago, September, and I had thrown out a date of October 5. seemed okay with most people. I now understand, Andy, that's no good for you.
It's, yes, I'll be away that weekend.
Okay? So I think this is something that's necessary for all of us to participate in. So we're going to have to find a date where we can all make it. And I know the fall is tough with the weekends. So I don't know if that's something we want to talk about right now. If we want to,
Let's do it.
you know, I think we do have to kind of firm up dates at least through December for the school committee meetings, the regular school committee meetings. You have in your folders the proposed schedule that we had started to discuss last time. Does this reflect, okay, it reflects the
It reflects the change.
the
from
changes,
December
the
with
cha- the
proposed
change in
change.
December that we had made last
And it
time
reflected the,
to try to accommodate Dennis a little bit.
I'm also pleased to report that I was able to work with one of my clients, and I at this point, we will be here on the 4th of
Mazel
November, so.
Excellent.
Yeah.
I would only say about the planning meeting, I do agree that it's important to have all the perspectives. That stands sort of between us and moving forward with the
Yep.
budget, and between us and moving forward with goals for the year, so.
Is there any other
Earlier rather
Saturday
than-
that works for people?
I can do Monday mornings early, Friday mornings early, you know, because I think it's almost better to have short 90-minute meetings, cover one topic than, like our last one, we went on a lot of things for like 4 or 5 hours.
That was purposeful. I mean, until we've had one of these under our belts now. I think until we start doing this more regularly, and it's really hard to find the time to do things like this because we have so much other stuff that we have to deal with. And taking what would essentially be a half day during the week is challenging for me, I think for others as well. That would be difficult to do.
So Paul, and it also doesn't work for you. Okay, so let's go back. Are there any Saturdays that will work for people
That was the only one for my parents' weekend.
that you were tied up?
Right.
So you could do late September.
Yeah.
What about everybody else?
You talking about September Saturdays?
Either the 21st or the 28th?
Fine by any of the.
Yeah, I mean, I
Saturdays are
have
fine by me.
commitments every Saturday morning.
Every Saturday?
Yep.
Okay, so Saturday's out for you.
What about Saturday afternoon?
I'd rather do Sunday than a Saturday afternoon.
Well, rather, or do you actually have conflicts
I have
that?
conflict Saturday afternoons. Yes, I have conflict Saturday afternoons.
Okay.
What if we do Sunday afternoon?
Sunday?
Most Sunday afternoons are a problem as well.
Oh, where's that? An evening?
Early evening?
Or an evening?
I mean, the only difficulty in the evening, obviously, is that, you know, if we're going to start, depending when we start, if we're talking about a half a day, you're talking about going from like 6 o'clock to 10 o'clock.
Yeah, it's a long day.
Or 7 o'clock to 11, you know, that kind of thing. It's tough, and if we're going to talk about doing things that are a little more, you know, longer term, bigger picture, it tends to be the kind of thinking works better in the morning.
I would not disagree. And having a fresh start, fresh eyes, lots of caffeine.
Is there objection to Sunday morning then? 'Cause
Not for me.
I'm fine Sunday mornings.
Does that help at all?
I think I have something on I can put my calendar and I threw it in it, but I believe that's something on the 29th.
I'm not available the weekend of the 21st, 22nd.
I can't do the 29th.
Okay.
The 6th?
Well, that's the original date.
No, the 5th.
Fifth.
Oh,
It was
you're
the
going that
5th.
whole weekend.
He's
right?
away
Sorry,
the
sorry,
weekend.
sorry, right.
And when is the long weekend? Is that the?
That's
The
that
next
weekend.
weekend.
I think it's that,
14th?
Yeah, I think it's probably the following weekend,
It's
huh?
not the 5th, 6th.
it's the 11th. The
13th,
11th.
14th.
Weekend of the 12th, 13th, 14th.
With the holiday itself.
Should we move on?
Well, unless we do the 20th, right? That would be the,
What about the 14th, the holiday itself? People get things going on.
That Monday? I'm around.
I think works for me.
Yeah.
Yeah, not for Ed.
That's a good day for us.
The
Well, I guess
20th,
we'll have to table
October
this.
20th is available.
What happened to Saturday? Did somebody just can't do?
I'll be the.
Yeah, a lot of Saturdays are a problem.
Say again?
A lot of Saturday mornings are a problem.
Ray was, that was really the only Saturday that was good, worked for him, and that's the Saturday that doesn't work.
That's the only Saturday that doesn't work for me. I'm around all the other Saturday mornings.
Well, should we do this offline then and not spend any more time right now?
Yeah. I mean, I'd have to check. I think the 20th could work if we were talking about like 8 to noon,
Mhm.
something like that.
Okay.
And I
Good
think
for
that could
everybody?
work, maybe.
Does that work for everybody?
So what, October 20th? Or
Yeah.
Friday, the September 20th?
Sunday,
No.
October.
Sunday, October
20th.
20th.
October 20th.
20th.
I know that's probably a little late from your perspective, Dot.
Well,
It's not really.
it depends on what we do about the
Yeah,
budget.
it's not really. I think it's fine.
Well, if 10:20 works for
Yeah,
everybody?
let me just double check, but I think that will work. I think that will work.
10:20, so that's Sunday morning.
Mhm.
And then we were gonna set the rest of this calendar.
Right. Well,
Well, my suggestion was, because we need to have a discussion about how the budget will work this year.
Yeah.
And we did change it last
Right.
year. So that we need to get ahead of the game in terms of some meetings. People are waiting to know what meeting we're going to present at and so on. So that my suggestion was to approve what goes through the end of December.
Mhm.
And then we're going to meet next week to talk about the budget process. And then subsequent to that, we can set the January.
yeah.
Sounds
Mhm.
good.
So, I mean, we've made that one change, you were able to make another change, so we're okay with the
Yeah,
rest of the
the only other
dates?
thing I was, we discussed, but it would be pending what we decide to do otherwise, is that January 6th meeting, I know I'm going to be out, and it's 3 weeks from that to the 27th, so
Right.
we talked about the possibility of maybe looking at the 13th for that meeting.
Maybe
I don't know if
when we
that's
get a
problem
better
for everybody
sense
else.
of what we'll be having for
Right,
budget
exactly.
meetings, we can,
Exactly.
we can
Right.
play with that. Okay.
Sounds good.
Yeah.
So otherwise, the meetings for the fall, I think, are okay, because they're typical of what we usually do, and except for the one change.
Yeah, I asked my daughter-in-law if we could reschedule the baby, but it didn't work out.
It's understandable. Okay. All right, so you have consensus on these dates through December?
Yes.
Okay, great. And let's see. Okay, anything else on those dates? All right. New business. We are joined by Selectman Irma Lauder, Doug McCaig, DJ McKinnon, and others who will talk to us about something that some of you may have heard about or seen a presentation on previously, but some ideas for what might be able to be developed at the harbor. And a lot of folks have spent a lot of time, so I would welcome whoever
Alan
would.
Peralt?
I'm sorry, Alan Peralt from the Harbor Development Committee. My apologies, Alan. So I don't know who would like to start. Alan?
Start a little bit, I guess.
Alan, if you could come up here.
Mike up
We
here.
have you
have
on
microphone,
TV.
we have cameras, we have,
Everything, huh? I'm Alan Peralta. I'm the chairman of the Harbor Development Committee. I've been on the committee for 5 years. A number of you are familiar with rowing in Hingham, most of which is done at the Lincoln Maritime Center on what is known as Barnes Wharf. And the Lincoln Maritime people have at least 2 piers or wharfs from the town to the Board of Selectmen. That's Barnes Wharf and what's called either Barnes 2 or Steamboat Wharf. And the thought has been, right now I think there's an extension that runs another year, 2 years. that's been done between the Board of Selectmen and the existing Lincoln Maritime Board. Harbor Development Committee looks at waterfront issues across the breadth of Hingham. But I think it's fair to say that there's been some discord, if you will, I guess, on the issue of a long-term maritime program there. And one of the other things, personally, someone who has not been actively involved in rowing, we also had an analysis done, a harbor-wide precondition survey, if you will. And one of the other dilemmas is that they don't have public working restrooms. They have porta-johns and the like. So the public facilities are somewhat lacking. It's not unique to that because, quite honestly, we don't have working restrooms on most of the harbor. And it's been something we've been looking at. So those of us on the committee had thought for a while that there needed to be almost like a 1,000-foot perspective on the whole issue of the existing rowing program and a long-term sustainable rowing program. In terms of, is there enough money to sustain equipment, facilities, put in things like restrooms and the like. DJ McKinnon graciously came before our board, I think it was like last fall, I think, DJ, September, October of last year, and volunteered to donate some money so an independent study could be done of the existing physical structure, but also programmatic analysis. So what could you do if you had bigger facilities, or what are the hindrances to doing that? What are the assets, that type of thing, which I thought was long overdue. One of the places he took a number of the members of our committee, as well as all the selectmen, was to community rowing, which is on the Charles River. And the community rowing people, it's a very successful program, first off, that has a lot of City of Boston school children involved in, a lot of disabled veterans are involved in, and they are phenomenal at raising money, and plus their facilities are top-notch. And it's open year-round. There are indoor rowing activities that can go on year-round, so there's a lot more training. So he had those people actually conduct the study. And rather than go on at length, I'd like then DJ and then Doug can join in to kind of go where they went with that study. But that's kind of the precursor of why we thought one was beneficial. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks, Al. And this is the study. I'll get a copy. So I'll pass these out. This is the same study that's been distributed to the selectmen and to everybody else that was interested. And then there's just a two-page handout that talks about the benefits of rowing. I'd like to thank you for the opportunity to come in. You know, we're still at the early stages of this discussion, and we want to meet with basically everybody in town that's interested in what could potentially happen at the harbor, so that we can get a lot of input as we start to frame a plan and move forward. A couple of initial comments. When we started this endeavor, I will say my personal focus was really to work with the folks and look at both the rowing as well as the sailing, and then it kind of evolved into some of the other water sports beyond that, to say, based on what we have in Hingham, can we take our facilities and really kind of bring them to the next generation and make them much more comparable to what you see, particularly along the Charles River, but we're also seeing further down on the South Shore, and essentially have facilities that can support a variety of water sports, rowing, sailing, but even some of the other things, you know, paddleboarding, kayaking, some of the other activities people want to do in the water, and do it in somewhat of an organized way for the size and scale of what we need in Hingham. So as we get into this, we brought CRI in. They've done studies and reports for numerous facilities up and down the East Coast and in other parts of the country very successfully. Their facility in Boston on the Charles River is actually the most active boathouse in the country. So they know how to run very active programs, but they also run all kinds of programs, everything from, you know, youth rowing to high school. They have Boston College rows out of their facility. They have veterans programs. They have handicap programs. They run them all, and they also have consulted on boathouses that have involved sailing and all the other water sports. So we thought it was a good opportunity to have somebody come in, have an independent view of Hingham, and say, based on the size, the scale, the demographics, who we're trying to serve, what we have for potential limitations for, you know, for water, for land, for infrastructure, things like that, what would their recommendation be? And basically that's the report you have in front of you, and I'll let you go through the details of that. There's also a separate flyer that does specifically talk about the benefits of rowing, and one of the quick highlights, which I think you'll see, is in Boston in particular, where they have kind of an open invitation for kids in the high school in Boston to join CRI. They not only take part in the rowing, but they actually have after-school tutoring that these kids get involved in, and they're also required to submit their grades on a periodic basis to check to make sure that they're both staying up with their academics as well as their rowing. They've taken hundreds of kids through this program, and they've taken the average graduation rate in Boston, which is about 64%, up to 100%. So all the kids that have joined CRI and stuck with that program have graduated from the city of Boston. So it is one of those activities that creates a great discipline kids seem to like. And I think you've seen with Doug's program and the high school program that Hingham has had great success. So really all we're trying to do specifically with that is just bring it up to the next level. They have found in communities when you provide a year-round facility, it makes it much more sustainable. It also allows certain staff to be hired on a year-round basis. And we're talking a facility that's open to the community, not just for the rowing and sailing. You kind of build these without getting into the details, a classic kind of two-story facility that has all the cruise shells and sailing facilities, kind of a storage area in the first floor, but then the second floor is a training facility that can also work as a function facility so that other town events and programs can be held there. So that's our goal. Again, I say we're at the early stages. We're going to start we've worked with the Harbor Development Committee, and I look at what we've done so far as more on a programming standpoint. There's a lot of great pictures in there that you'll see that have some good ideas and concepts, and are at a very early stage. But those will evolve as we meet with, Planning Board, Conservation Commission, and all the other groups that we need to work with. The summary of what we're trying to do is to get this to a point where we come up with a plan and a program and facilities that, we as the people that live in town feel are appropriate for town facilities. At that point, we'd look to then have the town issue an RFP that says, here's our plan for what we'd like to see for facilities. Here's our program that we want to see run. So it needs to serve the high school programs. It needs to serve the other youth programs and the other activities in the harbor. Who is willing to step forward and actually provide this to the town? So at that point, they could actually go out for an RFP and see what the response is. Obviously, our hope that it's, some group locally that would do that. Probably some version of Lincoln Maritime would be interested. We've obviously talked to them. They would love to do a long-term lease, but you can't do a long-term lease unless they go through an RFP process. So the goal would be to have an RFP once, the facilities, the programs that the town wants to see are down there, go out for the RFP, and then hopefully the response to that RFP is a commitment to do this. We're talking an investment of probably about $4 to $5 million to do this right. I think based on other activities I've been involved with, similar size and scale and even bigger size and scale, this is very doable as long as we methodically work through the process, get the right buy-in, and then have the capability of a long-term lease so that we can do that. From a school committee standpoint, we obviously want to make sure whatever the needs are of the high school, and maybe even the younger kids. I'm kind of looking at Doug as I say this because I know some schools have now moved the programs down to the junior high level, that those are properly served. We're not looking for money from the school committee, so we're just looking for advice, recommendations, and your feedback on this. So that's kind of the quick overview. I think I'd like to have Doug just speak for a couple of minutes because I know you're familiar that Hingham has a great program, but Doug, I think, can give a little bit of a summary of maybe some of the details of the program as well as how their needs can be met at this facility. So,
thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate DJ offering up the fact that you should hold on to your purses and wallets because we're not here to offer any request to the school committee at this point with regard to any financing of any type. We've created a phenomenal symbiotic relationship with the school, thanks largely in part to John Ferris. The equipment that our student athletes use has been raised independent, money for which has been raised independently. We donate all of the equipment to the town. So the town owns all the equipment. As an example, our new boat will christen on Saturday night. The Spirit of Hingham is a $42,000 state-of-the-art boat, which has been donated to the, has it been donated to the town, yes?
Yes.
Which has been donated to the town, and which will be christened as a Spirit of Hingham this weekend on Saturday. Why is this discussion with DJ important right now? It's because the program that we have is the single most popular academic activity at Hingham High School. As of right now, this fall, 132 student athletes have signed up to participate in the program. Now, I have to give a tip of the hat to John because we're entirely unfunded in the fall. However, we do benefit from the advantages of school's insurance and the town's insurance for liability and the like. But I'd like you to know that this is entirely funded by the desire of the parents to better the lives of their kids. We have 132 very active student athletes down there, and it's a real testament to how this has all come along, and we're trying to accommodate the growth. As of the relationship, and DJ and Alan spoke specifically about the need to have an unbiased evaluation of the utilization of town property on the wharf, this Barnes Wharf. It's an important consideration for an important reason. Lincoln Maritime owns the lease that's at the wharf. When the lease was last executed, our program, if it even existed, might have had 15 or 18 people in it. As we sprawl with the town's merchandise, the high school's property, we put extra strains on the property and utilization of the property, but these things feed one another. The middle school program is flourishing right now. There are more and more. We have a program we run in the winter for middle schoolers. It's sold out on day one, thanks in part to the Hingham Sports Partnership, who helped support some of the coaching staff, but on day one, I'll get to that in a second, it's sold out. The middle school program at Lincoln Maritime is not run by the Hingham High School Rowing Association, is sold out from the beginning to the end in the fall, so that's a real good bit of momentum that's coming into the program. So it's important, but the important thing with regard to the utilization of our student athletes at the school is we have 130 students who come there every single day. We can't go inside the building. We have no use of the facility. The only things that we can use are 2 porta potties. One, thankfully, is handicapped accessible, so some of the girls can go change their clothes in there when they come down there. And one of our coaches asked if he could, our budget could accommodate a 3rd porta potty because we're putting a lot of use in the porta potties. So that's the extent of the facilities. We have a good relationship with Lincoln Maritime, but not a formal relationship with Lincoln Maritime, who are the present leaseholders of the wharf. And as a result of that, we have sparse utilization to protect some of our equipment inside the property. I'm also pleased to announce it's a bellwether year for the program in terms of NCAA participation of student athletes after Hingham. As of tonight, with fall rowing starting, we have 18 Hingham High School graduates who participate at NCAA level. 1 capped the University of Pennsylvania. We've got 1 at Dartmouth. We've got rowers all over the East Coast. And we've got a girl who's just headed off to UCLA and some in the Midwest. So I'm very pleased with the success that they've enjoyed beyond Hingham High School, which is a very, very important testament to the activity itself. So that being said, it's important to thank DJ, but for his generosity, we wouldn't have this going. We're not asking for anything other than support and guidance on this process. This program will continue to succeed and provide opportunities for our town's children, provided that we have facilities to do it. I'm going to give you one other factoid in relationship to this, and it might add some perspective in relationship to the opportunity that this sporting activity presents. Not so much for boys, but Title IX, as you know, we've had a Title IX audit done at the high school. Title IX has demanded increase in access to sport for young women particularly. As an example, if your daughter were playing basketball at the high school, she'd have 1 opportunity in every 17 opportunities there are in college to participate beyond high school. So that means that every child who performs playing basketball at the high school level is competing against 17 others for a spot at an NCAA position for basketball. In rowing, as an example, there's 1.5 positions at the NCAA level for every individual woman rower. Now think about that. It's a staggering statistic that we all have to take heart of, because it creates opportunities for the girls in our town that they will never have in another activity, and only because of the math, and it's largely on account of Title IX. So I can answer any questions. The simple point is the hundreds of thousands of dollars that have gone into fundraising have all gone back to the town. We benefit from this relationship with the town. I'm very happy. We've enjoyed some good success. As you know, we won the entire state championships last year, boys and girls across the board, which is great. Our girls went to the national championships. We operate the organization with MIAA certifications, that is, we follow the MIA rules at all times. We do operate the board independently, however, to raise money for the organization. We have a 20-person member board that's meeting currently as we sit, and they're here to raise money, and they're here to get organized to do some of the work that you're going to see inside here if we get the chance to do so. So, that having been said, I'd like to thank you for that, and thanks for the opportunity to just give you a little update.
Thank you.
Just quickly, I'd just like to walk through some quick pictures, and I can kind of explain the timing on this, because right now, and these pictures are all in here, in the report. This is what we're all familiar with today. The nice big rotary in the waterfront.
Is it better to put that over here, or is it over there?
Yeah, actually, we put it over there.
Yeah, and
Then we can see it on the
Set it on
monitor.
here.
See on the monitor.
And
If you sit here, it'll
and
go
then
right
they
on
can,
the,
the folks at home can see it as well. So they don't have to
I think it works
move.
that way, but we'll see.
Yeah, that works.
Yeah, I
Okay.
can see it on TV.
Okay. And then, what our ultimate goal is to transform it into this view. So I'm going to take a quick look here and I'll put it up on. Again, these are in. Basically, you know, one of the big obstacles we have there from an infrastructure standpoint is the rotary.
Just
And
to
that's,
say
we are
so.
working with the selectmen, and that's going through the planning process itself. The recommendation that they had a few years ago to deal with the rotary was to eliminate the rotary, turn it into a signalized intersection, which slows the traffic down and makes it safer. What it does is it lets us incorporate a number of the other elements. We then have room to put in appropriate parking, we can add in the bike lane, we can add in the pedestrian level improvements, and basically start to make this whole corridor more of a waterfront park.
There would be approvals beyond town level that would be necessary for that.
And there's a state process that's going through. So right now, and you'll see in the report, we actually have this broken down into 3 phases. The first phase would be to go through the RFP process and hopefully get to the point where there can be a long-term lease agreement put in place. The first part of that would be a fundraising effort and activities related to kind of a first set of improvements that could occur on the waterfront, particularly with the docks and the floats and some of the staging areas. There's clearly work that can be done there. At the same time, the permitting work for the future phase could start. And our expectation is that first phase is probably about 2 years. Right now, with the rotary work, that's probably about another 2 to 3 years after that before the rotary could be eliminated. So it's probably 4 to 5 years from now. But during that second phase, that would allow us sufficient time, we believe, to do the balance of the fundraising. So while we get the permitting done, get the first phase of improvements done, then ultimately get the rotary done, then at the point the rotary is eliminated, we feel it's appropriate to then go ahead with the full facility. And ideally, if we could bring the facility online when the rotary is being completed, we'd like to do that. So we know this is probably, you know, a 4 to 6 year effort, but by getting started now, hopefully 4 to 6 years from now, we'll be standing here and we'll have a finished facility. So the effort with Mass Highway, with the town, with the state, to work in the rotary, that's all, you know, in process right now. Again, it's hard to pick an exact timetable on it, but at least the concept that we're talking about is the concept that was actually approved by the selectmen a few years ago. And then this is just another shot kind of from the water side, looking back and taking a look at. And again, these are still conceptual. They'll be the same ones that we'll be using for our initial discussions with the Planning Board and Conservation Commission. I'm sure they'll go through a lot of tweaking. But we're talking a building that has a footprint of about 4,000 to 5,000 square feet, but then with a second floor. And then architecturally, you know, we'd like to do something that picks up off of some of the older architecture that was on the waterfront with some of the hotels and things like that we think could be done very nicely.
Where is, just, hey DJ, one question is, where are you storing the boats?
First floor.
Okay.
To the right inside.
And have we solved our storage problem with the boats? 'Cause-
The permit storage problem?
Yeah.
Ridgefield has helped us solve that temporarily. We don't have a town storage problem. That's a very good point, Andy. I mean, at some point, I mean, we're caretakers of the high school athletic equipment, which is, in some way, we have to find ways to do it. And we've got a good relationship. We've been storing it in private storage in the winter. And of course, we have no location for our athletes in the winter. We go to the Wampatuck State Park or another relationship with DCR. So, no, we haven't formally solved that problem.
But this would help alleviate
Well,
it.
No, it would solve the.
Everything would be here.
I'm sorry.
The
Good.
winter training, boat storage, everything.
Looks wonderful.
I have a question. So your first phase, would you look at using that, I forget what the name of the wharf is, the one that's...
Steamboat wharf?
Yeah, that's what I thought it was.
Actually,
I don't want to say the wrong.
We really aren't looking at any type of programming on Steamboat Wharf really for the rowing and sailing. The thought of the steamboat needs a lot of work over time. The thought, and again, it's just a thought at this point, is to take the existing building that's on Lincoln. There is a spot over on Steamboat that might be
Right.
appropriate for it. Move it over there, but then that would really just be kind of more of an outdoor education center. So it's really not related to the active rowing and sailing.
So you would remove the Lincoln Maritime,
Yeah, if you go to the next photo, when you're looking back, it shows it a little bit better. So this shows, see the little building right there? That's
Okay.
the building that's on the wharf today. The one idea is,
Oh.
we would like to reuse it somewhere on the waterfront, it makes sense. We don't believe from a programming standpoint, we really need to use Steamboat Wharf for any of the rowing and sailing, and keep it all in its existing location, but with a proper facility.
oh, okay. And Lincoln Maritime and the Curtises are okay with it? They're in partner with this? So this is
Yes.
all one group? that's-
Oh, no, we've already talked to them.
All right.
I mean, as far as conceptually.
One thought I might add, one thing when we had a study done at the harbor, it would be conceivable to have like a float system go from Barnstable to Steamboat Wharf.
Yeah.
So one way, if you ever see community rowing, it's a very, I don't know how long that float is, but it's long. And in order for you to physically get it, maybe Steamboat just is a place to support the other end of a very long float. Because one thing we lack is a fair amount of float frontage, I guess,
Right.
almost like a slip, if you would, along the water. So it might serve that purpose.
Because a couple of years ago, there was talk about Lincoln Maritime using that steamboat. Yeah.
The access.
It is access is really.
No, I live on that part of town, so I'm very familiar with the area.
Well, thank you all very much for
Great,
coming.
thank you.
It's an exciting,
Exciting project.
very exciting. Yeah.
We need those again.
And DJ, thanks for your time and your generosity to this. It's a great cause, and we look forward to seeing the work go forward.
To hear about them. They do a great job.
Okay. So next on the agenda is the technology planning report. Dot will talk about, as you know, there have been a number of meetings over the last several months to develop the report that's in your packet. I hope you all had an opportunity to go through it. It's very well put together and comprehensive. And obviously, this is a topic that, our discussion this evening will just begin to delve into what we're going to continue to discuss for months and months and years as technology continues to evolve as we sit here. So, Dot, thanks for putting this together, and look forward to.
We need light on the subject.
Yeah.
So what was in your packet was the summary report. I'm going to just try to summarize the summary and give you some of the main points. But that's fine. But I do want to call your attention to a number of other documents that, in terms of volume, were really too much to include in the entire report. And there are 5 of them that are in the new school committee Dropbox, but also can be made available in paper for those who would prefer that. And possibly even we could put those on the website as another way that people could access them. So I want to call your attention to the fact that annually, because the Department of Education requires it, Joe Andrews has to put together a technology assessment, and it mainly is an audit kind of report of how many devices we have in each of the buildings, and he has to submit that annually, and it is approved annually. Certainly what we're suggesting here is consistent with that, so that's one of the documents. There's also a document that outlines the requirements for the park testing. And as you know, park testing is going to succeed, perhaps, the current MCAS testing. Our commissioner actually has not put that before the State Board of Education yet, but it certainly is a likelihood, and I'm going to mention that a little bit more in the superintendent's report tonight. So those technology requirements have impacted our thinking to some extent here, and that report is available. Last year, we were part of a grant-funded project that was coordinated by the North River Collaborative, and there were two concrete outcomes of that collaboration. One of them was an assessment that was done by a group called the Atlantic Associates, and that is probably the most up-to-date assessment we have of things like our capacity, our coverage, our number of computers per building, and all of that kind of thing. So that is available for your review, and we did review that. The other thing that came out of the North River Collaborative, I think you do have in your report, is a series of two teams that met over time to do some training, particularly around the integration of technology. It was much more instruction focused, and that summary, I think, is in your packet. And then Massachusetts has technology literacy standards for grades 9 through 12. That document is certainly something that we looked at carefully. And then there are technology requirements and standards in a number of the various core curriculum areas. And so there's some information in the Dropbox on that, but other things can be made available. So there's a lot of background reading, and that's partly the reason for my being kind of brief tonight, certainly asking general questions, but then giving you the time between now and October 20th, I guess it now is, for you to read through some of these reports that have more volume to them, to do some thinking about it, digest it, and also ask questions that may be appropriate. And I'll make sure that if this is one of the topics on the agenda for the planning meeting, which I would recommend that it be, I'll ask Joe Andrews to come to that meeting as well, because there are some technology kind of infrastructure things. So the summary of the summary, why are we doing this now? Why do we need a broad plan? And there really are a whole bunch of reasons, and it's really all of the reasons together, not any one of them. These aren't necessarily a sequential order, but we've had it as a strategic plan priority in the 5-year strategic plan. We're entering year 3 of that plan. That's always been in our thinking. We've had some action steps along the way. Last year at the school committee planning meeting in September, certainly looking at technology in a broader way was a high priority. And out of that came superintendent school committee goals, and one of them was very definitely in the area of technology. 21st century skills, I think it's no secret that technology and use of technology, integration of technology is one of the skills that's talked about. And that has been a school department agenda for a number of years now. And there are certainly other examples of other skills, and a lot of the focus on the global learning is there. Middle school construction timeline is very real to us now. We are into year 2 of construction, and this is the year that all of the big decisions are going to be made about the various technologies, the things that we need to purchase. Some of those decisions have already been made, because many of the wiring things are actually part of the general contractor's responsibility and budget. But we need to make a number of decisions, and I'll get to those in a minute, about what's going to happen at the middle school. And we are very aware that to the extent that we're looking for new technologies for the middle school, consideration of new ideas, whether it's equipment or some other idea like blended learning, online courses and so on, that decisions that we make about the middle school are likely going to impact the direction that we're going to go for the whole district. Certainly, every day it seems there are new and emerging technologies. Or existing technologies that become much more sophisticated, and this is the time that we need to start thinking about those, taking advantage of them. On the other hand, not planning too far ahead, because things do change very quickly. Need for infrastructure upgrades, and we've already begun that, in fact gone a long way during the last year. We're very proud of that. We have some aging systems and equipment in terms of hardware, so that brings into play, thinking and planning for things like maintenance and repair. And then we have lots of people who help us in a variety of ways financially. Hingham Ed Foundation is one, CPAC is another one, Hingham Sports Partnership, and often because they use grant kinds of programs, all of those organizations, as well as PTOs and school councils, because they function on a grant basis, we have teachers making requests, and these organizations often look to us to be sure that what's being requested is consistent with some grander plan. So to have a plan that's a little more articulated that then can be a guide or a template as the various organizations, who of course make their own decisions, but they can put them in the context of where the district as a whole is going. So what have we already done or is in process, with significant process? We've recently changed from Social Education Collaborative to Google, and that's for our email and our archiving. We are moving content filtering services, which is part of what we have paid South Shore Ed Collaborative to do, and the virus screening. Those have all been services that we bought there. You see those in the budget every year, and we're moving those services, in particular the server, to the Hingham Public Schools. So that's in process. There's some final settling up of the dollars because we've already moved into the new year, but we do anticipate there's going to be some savings there. We have increased the bandwidth, and this is with respect to Verizon. We've actually tripled it from 25 to 75 megabits per second. That is going to be important, we found out today as part of a webinar, as we move forward with the potential for park testing, that we need greater bandwidth. We've increased our wireless coverage and capacity, and there's a chart I'll go over in a minute that tells you a little bit more about that. We have more to do, but we made some more inroads this summer, particularly adding some additional access points to the high school and also to South School. Of course, East School is fully wireless, and the middle school will be fully wireless, but the other schools we rely on adding access points. FY14, the budget year that we're in, is part of the capital budget on the town side request. There is funding for a change in the phone service, and we are hooked into with the town service, Plymouth River East and the middle school. And so, in speaking with Steve Becker just the other day, his timeline is that by the end of this calendar year, we will have made the changeover for this building, Plymouth River and East. And by late spring, certainly well in time for our anticipated move into the middle school, the change will be there. So that is done by capital funds and the middle school funding for the equipment that will be in that building, but townwide capital dollars for the rest of it. We've obviously enhanced our cable capability for live and taped broadcast, and we've done a lot more talking about things like the ability to broadcast live from the middle school is certainly in our thinking, and we haven't made decisions yet on that, but moving forward, and more recently we have talked about live broadcast to be available at the field as something that we're working toward, and the concession stand as well. As I mentioned a minute ago, a lot of what has to do with technology is in the construction budget, so that's in process. The rest of the technology budget for the middle school is done not based upon need or wish or want or our priorities. It's done on a per pupil basis. There's a fixed number of dollars per students. Our 10-20 student capacity was put there, and so the budget for the middle school is about almost 1.4 million. I think it's $1.385 million. There are some things that you might call technology, such as copiers and such, that are in the furniture and furnishings part of the budget, which is another allocation per pupil. And you should know as well that the building committee, of course, is overseeing the construction project, and particularly the allocation of funds, and so that discussions and recommendations that come out of the middle school technology team would be going first to the building committee in terms of how the funding would be arranged. We've really got two teams with a lot of overlap, because people say, well, how do you know the decisions that will happen with respect to the middle school are going to be consistent with any plan, whether it's this one or some modified one that the school committee might adopt? And I would say that there's a lot of overlap of both committees. On the school department committee, the broader committee, it's Ellen, John, me, Joe Andrews, Roger Bodie, Derek Smith, Katie Robertson, Tony Keady are on the townwide committee. And on the middle school committee were Roger and Derek, and will continue, but in different roles on that committee. And again, Joe Andrews, the new middle school person who's there, will be a part of that as well. John and I in particular have sat in on several of their meetings, and as well there is a design architect named John Jordan, who is very much a guide and a voice of much experience with respect to other new schools and what they have. Where are we with respect to wireless? I mentioned a minute ago that we don't have to be concerned about Gloucester and middle school. That's sort of built into the fact that they are new schools and designed as wireless schools. But for the rest of the schools, we have to think about two things. One is coverage, which means full coverage would mean that you could go anywhere in the building and get wireless access. I can tell you that this building does not have full coverage. Most of our schools, all of our schools, are in better shape than this building as a whole is. So we have some wireless here in the office, not always reliable, but some, and they have some limited wireless on the town hall side. But in our buildings, you can see how many access points we now have. As I said, we added at South and the high school. How many would be considered full coverage? And that is to have every area of the building be an area where you could go with an iPad or a laptop computer or something and get wireless access. Full capacity means that you could go anywhere with any other number of simultaneous users and have comfortable access. And as we talk particularly about full capacity, we have to think about, again, the park testing situation, where we would be looking to test multiple groups of youngsters simultaneously, but in an environment where other things might be going on in the building. Someone is using a video, someone is using YouTube, and multiple concurrent users, but also in close proximity with one another. So that's the chart that Joe put together, but it was also something that the person from Atlantic Associates, and that was the North River study, also looked at. So you can see the difference. Coverage talks about the area. Where can you go in a building? And typically with wide area coverage, there's low user density and low demand. And I think in the report it talks about having something like that. You go to McDonald's and they have free wireless, but it isn't. It's a low density. Not everybody comes to McDonald's to use the wireless facility. So low traffic over a wide area. But capacity, multiple concurrent users. In fact, this morning when we were doing our webinar, Joe mentioned we're looking at a park field test that we're going to be participating in. We expected to participate in the park field tests this coming spring, but we talked about the fact that if we wanted to test in 3 labs, then on those days you might want to say to the social studies classes, you know what? You can't be bringing in any YouTube things. You can't be hooking into anything else that is going to require a lot of bandwidth at that kind of time. So multiple concurrent users in close proximity. High bandwidth requirement, obviously, and a lot of use of high resolution graphics and video. So it's just this issue of coverage versus capacity is a major one and not one to be minimized.
So, Doc, just before you move on, for an example, for the high school, we currently have 38 access points.
Mm-hmm.
Full coverage, so you're saying that if everybody was using it simultaneously, just about half the people would not have, there wouldn't be enough bandwidth to accommodate about half the people? have
Yeah,
to.
and access, it's not just the bandwidth, it's the access points,
Points.
right, right. And in fact, I mentioned that we had a letter from a parent today, and I'll get that to you, but one of the questions was, well, if my son and his friends wanted to bring iPads to the middle school like this year, then why couldn't they? And why couldn't, well, there is a good example that we don't have the infrastructure in the current older building to allow multiple use of anything at any one time. Now, it's unlikely that ever at the high school would everybody in the building be using everything at the same time. But certainly you can foresee situations where there are a number of classrooms that are using video and high-resolution graphics at a time when we're using 3 labs worth of testing. So, so certainly our goal should be full capacity. I'm not sure it's realistic to think we would ever get there, but to be only halfway there is not where we want to be either.
So Doc, would the plan be then at some, to have, say for this, during this budget season, a proposal that says if we were to get to full capacity, it would require X?
I
And that would
think-
be that kind of investment, and then we can look at it and say, okay, A, do we need to get to full capacity, and B, how long does it take to get there?
Mhm. Yeah, I think that's reasonable. I think I don't think it's sensible to look to getting to full capacity in any particular budget year.
Right,
But we need to
we
move
can say,
forward.
here's what it'll require, and here's, based on today, we don't know what it would be next year. Today it would be, whatever number it would be, and then look at, okay, what's the desirability of doing that over some period of time, and how long should that take?
I mean, we can certainly quantify the cost of adding access points. I mean, there's a cost a certain number of dollars to add some more access points. One of the things that Joe pointed out some time ago was that as long as we're dealing with access points, you can cluster them so that if we had, for example, testing, park testing, and we wanted to use a lot of classrooms, you could simply move some of the access points to give you temporary, better coverage in a temporary way. But I personally would not looking for full capacity at the high school using access points. I think,
Well, again, it's hard to make that, decision without knowing,
well, we
what
could
that
tell the
would take,
cost of
so,
them,
yeah,
but,
right.
I'm looking at how necessary that would be in the foreseeable future. That people are using all of these things to their greatest capacity simultaneously in a close environment. But we can quantify what it would cost. The cost of tripling our bandwidth, we just went from 25 to 75, and Joe seemed to think that even if we increase the coverage, that tripling is a lot of bandwidth. So that, and that was not very expensive to do. It was very inexpensive through Horizon to do a tripling. And honestly, we don't know what's going to happen in 3 to 5 years, even in terms of how these things are calculated and what the best way to get wireless is. So,
Don, is there somebody, whether it's Joe Andrews or somebody else, that would give us guidance on whether what they see as the norm or the need over the next couple of years? I don't mean to put
Yeah.
his name,
Yeah.
but is there somebody at our disposal, someone we could speak to that has, or maybe you've spoken to that?
well, I mean, you can read the report. Those are people who know what's going on right now. I think we all thought from the beginning that as we looking forward to about 3 years is about as far in the future as you want to look. And that's one of my concerns about saying, well, our goal is in this period of time to get to full capacity, because things may change in that period of time. So I don't think there's any, I think there are people who know a heck of a lot more about bandwidth and capacity than I do, and certainly Joe is one of those people, and I would invite him in. But I don't think that there are people out there that have a window on the world and a crystal ball.
No, no.
That's really what the issue to me is.
And you said Joe's going to come to the meeting.
Mhm.
There you go.
Yeah.
Yes.
So he can answer these kinds of questions, but the question is, should we be looking at getting to full capacity in a 3 or so year window, Or should we look to see what's going to be coming next and then make that decision? So move up, but not necessarily move to the...
Again, it would seem to me that there's really two issues. My guess is that the requirement for bandwidth is not going to go down.
I don't know.
The question is how you provide it, and I, clearly beyond my area of expertise, but, if you get it out of a satellite, or you get it out of a T1
Well,
line, or
that's,
you get it
that's the
however, right,
point, yeah,
right.
that's my point.
Right.
That, the current way that we get it, we need 80 units, 80 devices, 80 access points, 80 hotspots. But if we're going to get it some other way, and satellite, for example, would be another thought. So anyway, we should be moving from where we are, moving forward, just how much you're going to have to decide and how much the cost will be. Thanks to the Hingham Ed Foundation, and I would also say thanks as well to some of our PTO groups and also to the CPAC, who provided some smaller grant monies, that just this year we've got pilots, if you will, going on in a number of places, piloting the use of Chromebooks, the Google Chromebooks, in a library setting. If the main function in a library is going to be doing research, then having a device that's fairly inexpensive, but that is reaching out into the internet world, that may be a good investment. And so we've got, through an HEF grant, we've got Chromebooks being piloted in a library. Piloting the use of iPads in a lot of different settings, regular kindergarten classroom setting, used by the literacy tutors that we have in our Title I schools in particular. For early childhood, particularly in the area of communications and language development, we've got a number of iPads that are being used in those settings. We've got a grant for middle school science labs. The need in science labs for technology is different from our other regular classrooms. Next generation of the smart response technology are the clickers. And originally, when clickers first came along, it was just a way of getting kind of an idea of who needed more help, who understood a concept, who didn't. And now those technologies have become ones where they can actually collect data that can be analyzed and used. And so we've got one of those projects going on. And then exploration of additional capacities for our X2 for communications, but also for curriculum development and management, assessment management. So there are also cows that have been bought, some more cow computers on wheels. And I didn't add all of the things that are going on here, but particularly the things that are a little bit different from what we've been doing in the past. So the teachers who have written these grants and the principals in the buildings all know that these are things we want to pay particular attention to, so that when it comes time to buy some end-user equipment or look at particular software, then we'll have had some practice. Middle school, there are a lot of questions that are out there. I think the good thing about the middle school group is that we've kind of narrowed down to a fixed number of questions. And in fact, Joe Andrews has already developed kind of a rough budget. And we sit and look at it and look at what the needs are, but there are a whole bunch of things that just need to be decided in the near future. What technology would be needed in every classroom. And the big decision there is, should there be laptops? And this is for teacher use in every classroom, or should they be desktops? At eSchool, we have laptops. I think that Joe and some of the others on the group think that maybe desktops are a better way to go at the middle school. So that's a decision that has to be made. What technologies are needed in specialized spaces, such as in the library and the TV studio there. In the language lab, there are not very many software packages for language lab, but there are some, and that exploration has been ongoing, and I think that certainly the middle school folks, and Sue Keys obviously has been involved, have come up with what they think they're going to recommend for the language lab. The science labs, what kinds of computers do we need in the science labs? Well, they're ones that are going to be able to utilize probes, for example, so the needs may be there. The distance learning center. in terms of things like projection equipment and thinking about the ways in which that space might be used. And then what personalized learning devices are being considered. And as we look at that, obviously, the iPad or some other tablet technology is certainly under serious consideration. And I think as we've thought about this, it's really important that when we look at end-user devices, whether it be the use of smartphones or a tablet, generic kind of tablet, or an iPad, that it has to be not, we're buying this because that's what everybody's doing, or we're buying it because it's appealing for kids to use, or we're buying it because it's appealing for us to use. So we've really tried to think in terms of, as we think about purchasing things, tools, it should be about who is going to use them, when would they use them, for what purposes would they use them. And so that has colored our thinking somewhat, and I'll talk in a minute a little bit more about the iPads. But that's a decision that has to be made. Clearly, we have to know that we've got computers in classrooms and computers in the labs and the other spaces to know how much of a budget there might be left for something like a laptop initiative. But of course, some of the initiatives don't have to be funded purely by the building budget, by the building committee control budget. It may be an initiative that the school committee might want to take on in another way. What technology management and infrastructure will be used? We have many, as you know, cameras in that building. We have signage in that building that's electronic, and all of that has to be managed by some software. And so we've been to a couple demonstrations, and I think at this point, certainly Derek and Roger have a good idea, and John Jordan has arranged those demonstrations of the one they think will be the best for that. So that's a must-have, one of the things that have to be up at the top of the list. And then we've had a lot of discussion about the role of the new middle school technology specialists. When we first started out and put this into the budget, and even before we did this year's budget, we had been thinking along the lines that every elementary school has a technology specialist, and we had no one at the middle school other than our building administrators, who are quite adept at technology but also have other things to do. But the more we looked at what the middle school was going to have in it, and the needs for knowledge of infrastructure and not simply knowledge of the instructional component, the more we began to change our idea of what that role should be. And so actually tomorrow I have an interview with a person that the middle school is recommending for that technology specialist role. And it will be a person who's coming from business, a person who's been a network manager, and so we see this as being a person who would be more like Joe's role and less like the elementary technology specialist role, but would be based at the middle school, but would be someone who's very knowledgeable of all complex technologies that would exist there. So we'll be bringing that recommendation to you. This is someone that would be someone who would work, as Joe does, as under an individual contract as opposed to being a part of the Hingham Education Association teacher certified process. And then we're also asking the question, what existing technology that might be in the middle school can be repurposed? And some folks might say, well, it couldn't be anything there that's up to date enough to be repurposed. But in fact, we have the point of sale system, the food services department. In fact, we have fairly new microphones and public address equipment in the auditorium that could be used in the cafeteria of the new middle school, so certainly that's being considered. So at this point, we have a draft budget, a few more meetings to narrow down the answers to these questions, and we're excited about what will be there, and all that will be there, and how it will enhance life at the middle school. But the tablets are very much a part of that discussion. Whether they could fit into the budget really depends upon whether you're going to buy tablets for everybody in the middle school, or just one grade at a time, or how that will all work, and that's a work in progress, but a work in progress with kind of a defined ending point. So I mentioned a minute ago this idea of buying things and thinking about how they are going to be used. And the committee has felt that we shouldn't be talking about what we're going to buy. We should be thinking about how we're going to use the technology. And so there have been a number of folks that went off to workshops and such during our exploration this year. And there were a number of different schema, if you will. And the one that a number on our committee particularly liked was this one, SAMR, that initially tools might be simply a functional improvement, useful, but no functional improvement, kind of different ways of doing things, like replacing an overhead projector with a smart board, but not really using all of the capabilities of the smart board. That would be a substitution kind of thing. Augmentation, a direct tool substitute, some functional improvement, some added uses, a better way of doing things, and that might be looking at a calculator versus a graphing calculator. It has some functionality that is an improvement over what was there before. Modification, that a tool allows for significant task redesign, different uses and different learning outcomes. And again, if you look at the graphing calculator has lots of functions that not everybody uses, but as you are able to use it to a fuller extent, you find that you can spend much less time doing the calculations that took up 3/4 of the math period with only 1/4 of time left for analysis, and you can do the calculation part and produce the graphs and so on in 1/4 of the time and use the rest of the time for analysis. So different task redesign and again, the different outcome being the amount of time spent on analysis. And then redefinition, a tool that allows for new tasks, not previously things you'd ever consider that you could do in a classroom with youngsters. So that's been the one that we've kind of adopted as the way that we think about purchasing technology. It should be in the back of our mind always, what are we going to use it for, who is going to use it, and is there a continuum of use. And most of the technologies that we've had over the years have gone through a continuum. You don't usually buy something and immediately get to redefinition. You usually buy something and it becomes substituted, and then you can augment and do things differently and enhance what you're doing, and then you modify what you're doing and get different outcomes, and then totally redesign learning and instruction. However, we're not focusing entirely on hardware and buying devices. So what are some other things that are in the works? Student access to virtual learning, example, online course enrollment. We've looked at 3 different vendors here. VHS, which is Virtual High School, seems to be one that most of the communities around here use. We had hoped to pilot it last spring. I wrote a grant. We didn't get the grant. And also, we found, as we explored more, the time to introduce something like virtual courses or online courses to kids would be around the same time they're doing course selection, which is in the March or so time frame. We don't have money in the budget for this year. However, we did put some money into the budget for software related to the new educator evaluation. The new educator evaluation, the principals believe, will be ultimately enhanced by having some software for laptops or for handheld devices, but that our strong feeling is that we want to experience it first before we make the decision as to what software. So the money that we had put there for the software for educator eval could go instead to do a pilot of this virtual learning. You know, it's not just a matter of finding the money. There are all kinds of things you have to look at if you're going to adopt online learning. You know, who gets the opportunity to choose the courses? How do you control it so that there's a fairness when it comes to things like grade point average, particular grades, who gets to use it in terms of, is it for enrichment? Is it for replacement courses? For courses that kids have already taken? There are a lot of things that need to go along. And actually last spring I engaged Paula and particularly the counselors to begin to look at some areas of concern and how they would address such an area if we were to go here. It's always better to be kind of armed with what potential problem areas are than to get halfway through and then have to make some tough decisions that impact very important things in kids' life. So that is something that's very much in our planning and thinking for a small scale. Typically, you buy these services by seat. So you might say, well, we're going to buy 10 seats for next spring, and come up with a way that they can be fairly shared. Administrative software for the evaluation, we talked about that. Tony has actually worked this year in sharing that information both with the working group, the group of teachers and administrators that have been working on the plan, and as well he did a demonstration for the principals. So we have some good ideas about what we want, but there was consensus of let's work our way through the system and then let's learn from other people in terms of what are the best pieces of software, and so likely we would put that then in the budget for adoption for next year, for FY15. Digital textbooks and tech books. The tech book notion is something I'm really very interested in. I've been to a couple demonstrations. We've had a vendor here, and the idea of a tech book is not the same as a digital textbook. A tech book is a course design which takes use of things that might be videos from the Khan Academy, or MOOC courses, or teacher-developed materials, or YouTube clips. And so courses would actually be designed, and what we would pay for if we followed along this tech book model is the training that would allow teachers to develop these courses, with the content pieces being free, available through the internet. And I think that's the ideal way to think about developing courses at the middle school level particularly, and in fact that is one of the functions that having tablets would serve. There are a couple of communities, only a couple in Massachusetts, who've gone the tech book route. One of them is in Burlington, and I've talked to someone there, and I've tried to engage a couple of our neighbors who are going the iPad route without having any particular thought like this in mind, that joining in together in terms of collaborating with respect to developing courses, middle school age kids, and using this tech book concept would be something that could enhance all of our lives. So that's very much on our plan for this year, to explore more. X2, we've mentioned that, expanded use, consistency, curriculum and assessment management. And then this other thing that some of you don't even know about yet. Last March, we bought into the National Student Clearinghouse. National Student Clearinghouse collects data. It goes back to, I think, 2004 or 5 is the first year, about college placement and retention rates. And through the Student Clearinghouse, there are 3 reporting periods during the year when we get new information that allows us to look at a particular class, or it allows us to look at a range of classes over time. So we've had this since March. The issue is it's complicated, and we need time to learn more about it. We have a meeting actually next Friday with the guidance counselors to see if we can get a little more knowledge. You know, it's wonderful to have a colorful graph to show, but if you can't answer the questions about what the graph is purporting to show, then it's not very useful to anyone. So we have it. It's a relatively inexpensive thing. Costs about $425 a year. It actually is through Naviance, so that all of the data about where kids go to school and where they apply, that goes off to this National Clearinghouse. Colleges, the majority of the colleges, 4-year colleges in the country, have bought into it, and so the data comes from both places, gets joined up, and allows us to find out more about our kids, not so much by individually, but in terms of patterns like what percentage finished college in a 4-year period versus a 6-year period, and that kind of thing. So that's something that exists, but we've got to learn more about the best way in which to use it and to be able to share that information. As we look forward in terms of operating budgets, I think There are a number of things that we have to just assume will happen. The more technology you have, the more we're going to need appropriations for training and professional development. And of course, I would argue that that's only a budget thing. And I don't say that minimizing the dollars, but the real issue there is going to be time. Where do we find the time with all the many other things that we want teachers to do and all the other things that the state and others require of them? Finding the time and making the time for training and professional development is really the tough nut to crack there. And then, of course, increased line items for supplies, projector lamps. I mean, our smart boards are getting older, and lamps are always in demand. And some of the smart boards need repairs. That kind of thing normally comes with things as they age. Although projector lamps have gone down substantially in price when we first started putting the smart boards in. And apps, if we were to go to a handheld kind of device, then there are apps to be thought about, and software and licenses and that kind of thing. And then the repair and aging equipment is another kind of a line item. On the other hand, there's some potential for savings in the terms of the internet access and the service management. We've been paying a fee each year to Social Collaborative, and part of that was for the person who would manage those things. And so that's being moved in-house now, and so there's some potential for savings there. And as well, as we look to making decisions when we do buy equipment, not for the middle school, because we can't do leasing, if anything, that MSBA is going to support. But as we look at other kinds of purchase decisions, often leasing versus purchase is a better way to go, but important to know that if you lease things, that becomes an operating budget expense. If you purchase them, likely as a capital budget. So there can be some transfer of where the weight of the obligation comes. And then possibly tech savings with the use of digital texts or tech books. I've said for a long time that I would never advocate for the use of tablets only to try to save money on textbooks, because while the initial cost is a lower one, we have paper textbooks that we can use for 10 to 12 or more years, and so the cost isn't that much if you go that route. So there are other very good reasons for looking at digital text or tech books, but I don't think that saving dollars should be the big reason. So what are some of the next steps? I mentioned those earlier. The school committee would take the report under consideration, and in the meantime, you might ask some questions and we can get you some answers. The middle school technology team needs to keep on moving forward simultaneously with their budget development for the building committee approval. The school committee discussed the report as part of the planning meeting. You'd identify some priorities in terms of timelines and particularly things for the FY15 budget and for the goal setting that we typically do each fall. Meanwhile, we will continue our research, our further exploration, and there are some other areas that we're exploring that you can see in the report itself. Visiting with other communities and collaborating. We had a great visit with the Norwell Public Schools. They embarked on an iPad purchase this year, and we had a team of folks that went there. We learned an awful lot from them, and so there's always something to learn from another district, but I don't believe that our thinking is that just because somebody else is doing something, that's the main reason for doing it. We have lots of other good reasons for moving forward with technology. And then vendor and product reviews and looking at our pilot results of the things that are happening this year with the grants and further planning. So that's the summary of the summary. Be happy to answer questions.
I just have one, Dr. Gallen. It's not really so much a question, it's just a statement. I think technology is a hot issue. I think people like talking about it. I think this is a great summary. I strongly suggest not only do you put it on the website, but use your email system to send out a hyperlink, send it, blast it out to everyone in town, everyone there, and I bet our technology group can actually see how many people hit the hyperlink, so you know how important it is to people. I think this is a really good summary, and something should be pushed at the people. I think both the PowerPoint and also the summary here, and I think, because people talk about it all the time.
Yep.
And you talk about Norwell, you talk about Hull even got iPads. So I think it's a good report, and I think we should push it out to people.
Okay. We do have, in terms of a different technology, we have websites. There's a superintendent's website that doesn't have a lot on it yet, but gets a little more every day. And so my thought was to put this report on there. And possibly some of these other background, I would want to make them selective, because without any kind of background about the background, I'm not sure how many people would like to read them. But I had planned to put this PowerPoint and the report on the website. So
I think that's great, but I think you should also email it out, blast email it out, just because then people might really look at it. It's hard. Our website is not really the easiest website to maneuver. And maybe the superintendent one would be easier, but that's just my opinion.
So when you say email it out, Andy, to whom?
Well, all the listservs. I mean, every person who's on the listserv. I mean, if
Should we
you-
wait until after we have our planning meetings, we might have some consensus about what direction we're going in?
Well, I think, maybe that's actually a good way to elicit consensus. I mean, this is technically, as a public document, it's on the TV.
Yeah, but the point is not sharing it. The point is for us to take this and kind of move forward with it and get it to a point where we then implement a policy for the district, right? And that's not something that 23,000 people can do.
But I just feel that you should put it out there. It's, it's a good summary. I think the main reason why to put it out into email is people talk about it all the time. That's, people come up to me, hey, Hull's got iPads, Norwell's got iPads, when are we gonna get iPads? And this, to me, is a very good summary. It'll just keep people up, and that's why I would email it out.
Well, or to add to that, I think, Dot, you sent an email district-wide the first day of school, using the X2 system for the first time. I heard tremendous positive feedback about that. People really enjoyed getting that message. I heard today from a parent who told her third and fourth graders and let them read the letter, and they were excited that the lady at the top was caring about them and watched that the buses all came home and everybody was safe. And I thought, wow, that's great. So maybe, using that kind of communication again, but just identifying. We've talked about this technology plan. It's now on the website. We welcome your feedback, your input, because you've presented it tonight. So I think that positive next step, follow-up to a communication that
So
you use the new
maybe an
tool.
email more about the concept, and then referring people to these
Yeah,
other
I think that
documents,
would be
rather
great.
than.
I think in terms of outreach, in some ways, kind of less is more. If you put out, like you're saying, a one-page email that talks about, came up at school committee, these are the kinds of things we're talking about, whatever.
And you can find
For
out
those
more
of you,
by-
right,
yeah.
for those of you that are more interested, certainly go to the website and go into it, because I'm afraid if you put something out with 2 or 3 or 4
Seven,
attachments,
yeah,
right?
7 pages.
Yeah.
I'm not saying put out
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
saying put out a hyperlink.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I'm
yeah.
not saying put it out the document, but the hyperlinks,
Right.
if they want to go see it, then they can go see it.
Yeah, as part of that email, that'd make a lot of sense, yeah.
But I'll just follow up. One of the things when I read this plan and then I read Joe Andrews' technology report, he talks about the use of the website and making that more of a tool. And I noticed it in the department goals that there were a couple of departments that had on their goals for the year
Doing their own
of
website,
using
yeah.
more websites. And I think the website should be incorporated into this overall planning report, because it's become a key tool that we're gonna, we're sending students to, parents to, teachers are using it for communication. And I think that's a central component to making sure there's consistency, that the messages are consistent with what you're doing. The guidance department just announced their upload of their site, and I had happened to go on it last week before I knew that it was launching. I was looking for the name of the guidance counselor for my kids, but I noticed that was done on a different platform, on a Weebly platform versus a WordPress. And so the formatting was different, and it took me a while to figure out how to move around. And so I think even from that standpoint of having that consistency that everyone is knowledgeable about, and it's going to take training, it's going to take development, but I think that can be added to this from your direction, to make sure we're all going in the right way. And the other thing that I noticed reading through these reports that was a red flag for me was that any Windows XP based computer is really going to be obsolete as of April 8th, 2014, which is only 7 months
Right.
from now.
And Joe is very much aware of
Yeah.
that, and that's why one of the last things we want to do is to buy the equipment
Right.
for the middle school.
Yeah.
Make that as late as we can.
But one of my concerns is, the Park report said that those types of computers would not necessarily be capable of running the tests, and Microsoft won't be servicing security updates for that operating system anymore. Tom, I think even from a town standpoint, or for advisory committee to consider what inventory of Windows XP computers does the town have, those should be replaced. If they can't be serviced anymore, software won't be developed to be used on them anymore. That's something we have to identify. I don't know how many we have in the schools, but that was something that was really brought to my attention once I put all these documents together. But I think you've done a great job of looking at what's the infrastructure. If we get all these tools, will they even work? And so I think that part of it, I was really impressed with reading this and having worked with you, and I hope I can continue to contribute to your committee and work on this, because it's something that it's a part of our lifestyle now, and it doesn't matter what kind of job you get. Frankly, if you get unemployed in the state, you have to use the computer to get your unemployment if it ever starts working.
One of the
So-
things that you mentioned that is in the report, but I didn't mention here, was the idea of surveying parents. We did that many years ago, but it's been a long time now, to see what's available in the home, to know what are some of the other issues that we have to think about before moving in a particular direction. And so that might be something that either community outreach could manage, or that I can engage some of the folks in the All-Town PTO to help us with.
Yeah.
So.
Thank you, Don. I think it is important I think they're all good points about making sure that we share this information with folks, and that they know about the time and effort that we're putting into it. But folks should also know that this is not the first time that we've talked about, looked into, researched, or spent any time on technology. So this is not a brand-new thing. It's obviously evolving, and we're looking at it as a major component of planning as part of the strategic plan, and also planning for the next budget year, looking at the infrastructure in terms of the new school and how that evolves. Didn't we roll out Windows 7?
Not that long ago, it's.
Right, but throughout the district significantly, didn't we?
Yeah. I think one of the things that people don't realize is school setting is different from a business setting. And, the change is not easy with respect to technology. I mean, we've just made the change for the email, and it's driving us all crazy. And it's mainly driving us all crazy because we don't have the time to stop everything else and be trained. And so we're wasting time doing things. And the same thing happens if you're in a major business. And I have a friend, and she's in insurance, and they just adopted a new system, whatever system they use, computer system. And they just shut down their insurance stuff for 3 days, and everybody went to training school. And, we're trying to find minutes here and minutes there on top of many other things. So it becomes an additional challenge, and because it's a challenge, it isn't that people don't want to improve, it isn't that people don't want to take use of new things that ultimately are going to make their life easier and provide more opportunities for kids, but there's just a reality that time is a huge, huge issue for us. Bigger than the dollars. Sorry, Tom, but it is bigger than the dollars. So, but anyway, thank you for all of your input.
Yeah,
That will
so
be
I have
helpful.
something, going back to what we came up with last year at the planning meeting, and in technology, there were 4 goals that we established. And 3 I've heard really addressed very well. Clearly, there's been a lot of time and effort going into this. But the first one that we talked about, which was what format and function personalized computing environment might take, that to research one or more options and models, coordinating those efforts at the middle school, preparing the summary report, which is here, but also developing a specific proposal for our consideration. Where do we stand on the specific proposal as to how we want it, it's being proposed that we look at going ahead with personalized computing?
Well, I think of it in 2 ways. One personalized in terms of equipment,
Yeah.
and the other personalized in terms of a blended learning approach. This VHS, the online courses, I would say is in the latter category. Looking at tablets or iPads is in the former category. And our committee has had discussion beyond just what should we do at the middle school. We've had a consensus, I think, of committee members that as we look at things like handheld devices, that at the elementary school, we don't see this as something that we want every child to have. There are many wonderful uses for tablets at the elementary, and some of them are in areas we're piloting, particularly with preschool-age kids, skill development maybe in other grades, specialized areas like science, even at the elementary school, but not that every child would have a tablet of some sort. Middle school, we think, is ideal because of development of organizational skills. Instead of having 4 textbooks and 10 notebooks and so on, everything is there. When we went to Norwell, the kids could hold their computer up to the, what do you call that thing?
QR code. The QR code.
And we're all in the same place. And so getting kids to be organized, learning about research, some very specific goals for the middle school. At the secondary level, we've let that open in terms of really moving more toward bring your own device to school, and all of the things that need to go with that. And those are things like policy, writing or changing policy about what we have. We're not there yet in terms of the capacity at the high school. I think if we go forward with a tablet proposal at the middle school, which I think is more than likely, what we don't know yet is whether it can fit into the funding of the middle school, but if we go forward with that, then we have to answer questions about, well, okay, so do you give them to 6th graders, and then when they get to 9th grade, then you buy new ones, or you lease, or what do you do? And do any then ultimately move on to the high school? Or are high school kids at that point choosing their own device? So I'm not sure that, well, the other place that's relevant in terms of a personalized environment is with respect to the tech book concept, where we're developing curriculum that pulls in resources from everywhere, free resources that are out there. Right now, teachers have a textbook, they have a curriculum, and in some cases that, of course, has to be following what the core curriculum is. And then they're looking for other things to fill in, whereas this model would be you develop the whole curriculum by using resources that are free and available. And teachers would learn to do it. And when you develop curriculum that way, perhaps there's a video that you want as part of that curriculum, but next year, there's a better video, or maybe there's something on iTube, and I pull one out and I put the other one in. And so it's fluid with respect to changes over time, and it's fluid with respect to what individual kids may need. Perhaps the content component of a tech book could be, for certain youngsters, watching one of the Khan videos may be the way they get their content. For another youngster, it might be another resource to go to. So personalized in the sense that different kids need different things. So the whole bunch of components to looking at a classroom both with walls and a classroom where much of the instruction goes beyond walls.
So,
Couldn't a student download that textbook on his own personal device?
Yes.
Or if the
yes.
school, or if the school provided to him?
Well,
Doesn't
that,
matter,
yeah.
right?
I don't think it matters. But that's where we need more help in terms of what is the percentage of kids that already have a handheld device in Hingham? I bet it's pretty high, but we don't know that. We don't know that.
So I guess what I'm still, I think is still missing is we talked about, I thought, having specific proposal that we were ready to implement at the middle school, that would be presented to the school committee so that we could weigh in on that before any decisions were made as to how we were going to spend the budget at the middle school.
Well,
Is that still contemplated?
Well, I think that there's a balance here with respect to the middle school. On the one hand, we have a building committee, which is charged with overseeing the project and with the expenditure of dollars. And on the other hand, we have a school committee that's charged with programmatic decisions. And the two have a significant overlap, so that we don't have one committee going off doing one thing and another saying, oh, well, no, we're not going in that direction at all.
So we'll get a recommendation from the building committee?
Well,
I think it's the other way around.
I
I think the building committee has to get a recommendation from the school committee.
well, it depends upon whether you're talking about expenditure of dollars or not. So,
Well, what I'm getting at is, if we're going to in the middle school, whatever the recommendation is from the technology committee as to how we should handle technology in the middle school, whether that's a iPad-type tablet program, whether it's a Chromebook program, whether it's however we want to do that, seems to me that the school committee needs to weigh in on that and say, okay, that makes sense to us. We want to go forward with a Chromebook approach or the tech book approach that you're suggesting, whatever, and here's how we ought to be, and here's how you ought to be looking to allocate that budget. Seems to me that doing it the other way around, asking the building committee to come back to us with recommendations that may not be consistent with what we think is the right way to approach that is a kind of looking at it backwards.
I suspect that we're going to probably come to some consensus, you don't think so? And you got a number of people on the building committee.
so are you suggesting,
Yeah.
Dennis, that, for example, whether it should be laptops or desktops in the middle school is a decision that the school committee should be making?
Well, I guess my understanding was when we established the goal that there would be a specific proposal as to how we approach personalized computing would be, we ought to pursue a tech book approach. And the way to, and it can be done, like you say, with iPads, or it could be done with laptops, or it could be done with bring your own devices. But that's a programmatic decision that we would certainly, I think, want to have input from and a recommendation from the professionals that have spent, again, a lot of time looking into this. Clearly, that's from all the information we've gotten. But then say, okay, the way we want to programmatically go ahead of this is a tech book approach. Where I know Ellen and I have had some discussions about the idea of flipped instruction and flipping the classroom kind of approach or whatever. And then say, okay, how do you do that? And how do you go about it? And then, I think, talk about what's the best way to do that from a financial point of view. You can lease them, you can ask, I remember when my kids, I'm dating myself, had to buy, the calculators that were $75 at the time, was a lot of money 25 years ago in high school, that was a programmatic decision that was made. I don't know whether it had anything to do with the school committee or whether it was done.
Decision made by the recommendation by the math department.
Right. But the math department, that was then hopefully discussed at the school committee level as to how we're going to fund it and whether we should ask the kids to do it and so forth. So, again, my concern is that I would like to have a part, I don't know how everybody else feels, in part of that discussion before decisions are made at the building committee level as to how we're going to use the budget for technology.
Well, but not for the middle school, that's not going to happen.
Why is that going to happen?
Because you have a building committee in charge of that project, and then you have an administration as educators who are informing the building committee and the consultants that they have. So the school committee there really isn't a role for the school committee in that.
But if we're going to change the approach in the way we use technology and the way kids are going to be instructed with that technology, which certainly is something that I would expect to come from the professionals in the school department, it seems to me that that's part of our role here, is to hear what that is and say, that sounds like a great idea, or have we considered this and have we considered that?
What kind of impacts then going forward, whatever choice is made at the middle school
Exactly.
level is going to
Yeah.
affect then the high school level?
Yeah.
So from that perspective,
Yeah.
I guess I would want to have some input. I'd like to be consulted because it's not just the middle school, even though I understand that
Right.
the authority
Yeah.
has to do with the middle school in that budget, but it does impact the high school because those kids are coming up.
Right. I mean, some of the decisions are, you know, they are what they are based on what the MSBA is requiring,
Yeah.
what today's technology is, what makes sense, you know. So it's not like someone comes to us and says, okay, figure out what you want.
No, I understand.
It's, you know, it's a very narrow choices. And remember, we're in the model
Mm-hmm.
school program. So a lot of the decisions are being made based on what was put into the model, you know, which is
Understand.
kind of driving our
And
project.
that's why, and again, that's why I said when we established the goal almost a year ago now,
Right.
it was that we would have a specific proposal presented to us for our consideration. And I just wanted to know when we might see that proposal.
Well, I guess I misunderstood that goal. To me, a specific proposal is that we would move forward this year in FY14, using the dollars that we had with the virtual high school courses. That's one thing that we would move forward with. That we will likely, more than likely, be looking for a proposal for the middle school that will include tablets. What isn't clear yet, because we don't know what the basic infrastructure costs are going to be, whether that would be something that we could entertain for 6th grade, or 6, 7, or 6, 7, and 8. That's the kind of proposal that I thought we were talking about. And that the middle school staff believes that if we were to adopt a tablet initiative, then it should not be concurrent with the opening of school in September. That all of the new things in the school, the very newness of the school, all of the kind of built-in technologies, would not be a good time to adopt a tablet initiative. So that likely would then happen either at mid-year or for the beginning of the following year. So those are some pretty definite things. But until we know how far the budget can take us by identifying and answer some of those other questions, it's hard to go further than that.
Is that something that will be developed in the fall, this fall?
Yeah, it's got to be developed fairly quickly,
Okay.
within
So
months.
we will then have some additional information.
Absolutely. But I think that what the proposal would be a full package. We can't separate it out and make independent decisions. We've got to look at what do you have to have, and then narrow that down to then what is left for new technologies. And then a school committee role certainly would be, okay, if we really want to have a tablet initiative and you think strongly enough that it should be a tablet for every child, then are you willing to invest some budget dollars into allowing that to happen if, in fact, the allocation that's available is not sufficient? So there are some questions that need to be answered to give a little more specificity to that. With respect to the adoption of software for the educator evaluation, the administrators want for that to be for the following September, not this year, but the following September. So that would be a specific proposal with respect to the budget. So specificity in terms of dollars and specific proposals, I see as budget things, and obviously you have full authority over those. I think the initiative with respect to the tech books, that's, we need to get some more people on board for that, number one. And number two, it is a huge initiative in terms of curriculum, not one that is consistent with the first year of educator evaluation adoption. It just isn't. So that would be something that we would be looking for for the following year. And in fact, that would also give us time to convince some of our peers that this might be a good way to go. Because what you buy there is a person who comes and kind of lives with you for a year. And if you can get 3 people that could share such a person, that's a lot cheaper than one person. So I think that's a very real thing, but it needs more exploration before it becomes a budget item.
Right, and I think, certainly we're going to have discussion about this issue when we meet in October, assuming we're meeting in October. And then, it's something that long-range planning can take up on kind of a more specific basis as we move forward. I mean, just a perfect example, I think, a lot of these choices are going to be educator-driven, right? An example from the middle school is, all the FF&E, furniture, fixtures, and equipment meetings that staff have been having over the last several months, picking, what makes sense for them in terms of actual physical setup to teach, right? Whether it's, tools that they use, desks, displays, shelving, storage, all that kind of stuff, even down to some color palette choices and design. The building committee kind of comes in, doesn't really participate in those day-to-day regular meetings, but comes in at the end, and the only time we really made some changes were when, some of the design and color choices were not so great. So we made some alterations there. But generally, a lot of those things are educator-driven and based on their experience as educators and what's going to make sense for them to deliver the services to the kids. And they're the ones that know best because they're the ones who've been doing it.
Yeah, I guess, again, I don't know if anybody else, Liza obviously wasn't here last year, but if others from our meeting, I had, and everybody knows I have distributed things during the course of the year, some thoughts, and that we were looking towards something that would say, are we going to change the way we use technology in the classroom? If so, how would that impact on the hardware or software that we would need to do that? And that would be more of a, schools committee discussion as to, hey, we want to do that, and in the 7th grade in the math program, we would start over here, or that kind of thing. Clearly, I'm not suggesting that we're going to be telling the professionals in the education area, which textbooks to use and those kinds of things. But I was looking for something that we'd be moving toward, not to implement necessarily next year, but to make sure that whatever we were doing in the middle school was consistent with what we will be implementing, even if it's a year or 2 or 3 down the road.
Thanks, Don. Anything else on tech for now? Okay. I'm sure we're going to talk a lot more about it. So it's the second week of school, and first day I know kids in my house were up early and excited and waiting for the bus, which almost never happens. And then day 2, it was hard to get them out of bed. So Dot will tell us about how things went. I know, I echo the comments about that first day's email. I think it's a great tool to be able to use the X2 system, and particularly for Kim Smith and the food services program, because I know last year she was sending out emails to and she thought everyone was getting them, and they weren't all getting them because not all the schools had their folks implemented, inputted into the system. But now that's been accomplished, so now everyone can.
And that's a result of moving from a school-based listservs to getting everything. And we've learned a lot. You would be surprised how many people go away and have messages, out-of-office messages, And they pinged and clogged up my computer for about 2 hours. And mostly, at first I thought we had a lot of incorrect addresses. Well, we didn't have a lot of incorrect addresses, but we did have a lot of people who share a lot of information when on their message that they're going to be out of the office. I'm not so sure that's a good idea, but anyway, so that was a nice ability that we now have, and worked hard to get that all inputted over the summer, because the elementaries pretty much had not used that facility. So the opening was a fairly smooth one. There are always a few transportation things that we have to settle down in terms of timing, and somebody gets on the wrong bus and so on, but nothing of any major proportions went there. Of course, we do have the extra bus this year. We approved the 20th bus in our fleet, and so that's in place. Enrollment, I had intended originally to share that with you tonight, to have the actual September 1st enrollment. We do a rough count on the first day. On the Thursday, when kindergarten comes, we do another rough count. But we still have kids entering, and particularly this year, because we had 2 holidays last week, Jewish holidays, that we want to be sure that our first count is a real accurate one. So those things will be coming in tomorrow. Some came today, but not all of them. But it is fair to say that I think overall our enrollment increase is going to be less than we projected. The last time we were here, we projected about 67 additional kids. We're going to have fewer than that. It's probably going to be in the 40 to 50 range, and a lot of different reasons for the projection being less. The biggest of them is that at the middle school and the high school, we project kids that were here last year until we hear that they're not coming, and often we don't hear till today or tomorrow or whatever. But really not surprises at the elementary level. No more than a 1 or 2 student swing in each grade at each building. One of the new things that has come up this year is the park testing field test. On the first day of school, what wasn't so welcome was the news that there's a field test nationwide in the sense that all of the folks that are involved in the same consortium that we are going to be field testing, and that we got a letter that we had been selected for field testing in 3 of the buildings, the high school, the middle school, and the East School, and in a particular grade and a certain number of classes, and you have a kind of a summary there that shows how many classes in each building. Middle school, 2 grades would be tested, and at the high school, 2 grades, but one of them would be electronic testing. And so this morning, all of us involved spent an hour and a half going over a webinar, going through a webinar with all of the requirements and expectations and a thick PowerPoint. And it does seem as if it's an expectation requirement. They give some options for not doing this. One might be the school closed. I mean, this is rather dramatic, or your grade configuration changed, and instead of being a 6 through 8 middle school, now you're 5 through 8, those kinds of things. So it does seem that it is here to stay. And on the good side, of course, it does give us an opportunity, particularly in the electronic area, to see what that's going to be all about. But significant amount of training that's going to be required for the people who are going to be supervising the test and making decisions about what classrooms are going to be tested. It's fairly significant interruption to the school as a whole, particularly at the high school, where things don't always fall along specific grade lines. So if you're going to be testing Algebra 2, some of those kids come out of the 10th grade, and some of them come out of the 11th grade, and so there's a lot of work that goes with this. There are 2 testing windows that come along. Some of these are end-of-the-year tests, and some of them are performance-based tests, which are more like what we've been doing with MCAS. And so, last year we had coordinated program review, and then all of those other audits and such that we had. So this year we're going to have park field testing. We do think, Joe was at the meeting this morning, that with the exception of having to buy some headsets for kids that will be tested, that from a technology point of view, we're going to be okay to do at least the pilot part. And of course, we still don't have any surety that our state is going to adopt that. So that was the other news on the first day of school. On the second day of school, the Secretary of Education, Matt Malone, is a former superintendent in Brockton and other places. I think he was in Swampscott for a time and was in the Boston Public Schools for a time. He's now the Secretary of Education. Been that since about March, and so he was doing a tour of the state, or at least our part of the state, and asked if he could come here to Hingham. So he and his communications aide came and spent about 2 hours. We picked South School. I picked South School for him to visit because they were on a short time frame, and that was an easy school to get into and out of. And so he had very positive things to say about our town. He said he'd never been to Hingham before, which is interesting given that he worked in Brockton for a number of years. But in any event, he enjoyed the town, he enjoyed the school, gave Mary a nice opportunity to point out some of the things that their PTO have been doing. They have a field, a beautiful little soccer field there that was built over the summer, new playground equipment, and some other projects going on. But so that was a very positive and enjoyable visit. So I think that's it in terms of the start of school. John and I will be meeting with Marion, and then we're also going to be meeting about monthly with Paul Field to see if we can make sure that all the projects that we want to get done can proceed along in an orderly way. And also we want to make sure that we get the biggest bang for the buck in terms of that new bus and how it might impact not so much overcrowding, because I don't think that we have overcrowding, but we do have some routes that are probably longer than we would like them to be, and how we might be able to work on that. But in general, a real positive start. And I also did get a lot of positive feedback about that email. I actually was surprised, because quite honestly, I've always believed the proof is in the pudding, and what people really want is for things to run smoothly, and they want competent leadership, and they don't care so much about who provides that. But in the end, it did seem that people appreciated getting a personal, what they saw to be, anyway, a personal note. So it was well worth doing.
Dr. Geller, on this park assessment, it says on the back page, next steps, confirm your district's participation. I mean,
Well, that is confirming.
Why don't we opt out? I mean, the thing is, the park's coming, which is great. You said
We
that...
can't opt out. We really looked at every one of the things that would allow us to opt out, Andy. And I was thinking of you as we did it. I knew what your advice would be. But no,
if the
we
thing's coming down anyways, just wait for the mandate to come. There's no sense in being ready for it, especially as you just said clearly, this is going to be a tremendous amount of resources used, training. We already do all the MCAS. There's only so many days in the school year. I just wouldn't do it.
And following up, mode of administration paper, why, if this is an electronic test, why are the 3rd, 6th, and 8th taking a paper test?
I don't know. The only thing that I can think of there is that they know that there isn't the capacity
Well,
everywhere
people
to
won't be
do it
ready, probably.
electronically now, number one. And number two, in the last year or so, they've been talking more and more about a longer transition where paper will be used.
But they're only asking for 2 classes of 3rd grade. Correct.
At each school.
At one school.
Yes, yeah.
But just that doesn't seem that burdensome for an electronic test. It's not like the whole school's taking it. It's
Right.
just-
No, it might be
Right.
50 kids or
Right.
43, whatever.
Okay. I was surprised to see.
But they've
the
had a
paper.
lot of feedback about the
Okay.
electronic piece. And for places, for example, that don't have internet access. So it's not
Right.
just about, do you have enough computers? It's whether or not you have the
Right.
infrastructure. So there's a very specific list, and we have to indicate if we wanted to opt out, why that would be. And I wouldn't even say opt out. If we could not meet what they're asking us to do, then we can indicate that and why. But they said, this is the expectation, this is the requirement, unless you're in one of those very specific categories. So, so I have to send that information in by the 18th, and then after the 18th, they would look at those communities. There were people online asking, we could have asked questions, but other people asked questions, and they asked questions such as, Well, you've got me down for integrated math, but we really teach Algebra 2, for
Right.
example, and so those kinds of things need to be sorted out. And if someone could not meet the requirement, then what would happen is that they would come up with another pool of people that would go through the same process. And then along about November, it would be clear about all of the communities that have participated.
Was the Commonwealth's letter about this attached to this? It says
Wasn't attached to it, it came before.
it came before.
Yes, it came before. This is the testing company. So we got a letter from the Commissioner's office first that said there will be a letter coming that indicates whether or not you will be selected or not selected.
All right. Okay, so the Fields project. Have you all been by the high school? So lots happened in the last 2 weeks. Visible, which is exciting. Just in terms of where we are with things for the folks at home. I know there's a lot of folks I talk to who haven't been by in a while. I say, you gotta go by. Maybe folks who drove by in July and saw mounds of dirt, not loam, but dirt. Some loam, perhaps. And now there's an actual field being constructed. There are light poles erected. There's a lot, bleachers being installed. There's a lot going on. So ongoing this week and next, the bleacher installation will continue. A lot of the decking has been installed. The seats will begin to be installed. The press box will be delivered and set up, I think, Wednesday and Thursday. Utilities all throughout the site continue. The walkways will begin to be constructed. Fencing will begin this week. Work has begun on the baseball field, not only the ground portion of it, but the backstop. Work on the multipurpose field is ongoing with the various layers being constructed. And I believe the turf carpet is set to be delivered sometime between the 18th and the 23rd of September for installation. We've been talking about scoreboards, and I have something to hand out to you, and we can talk a little bit more about this in a couple of minutes. I know we talked about this last week, but we need to talk about it again tonight. In terms of overall schedule, according to RAD, this morning we're still on schedule to use the multi-purpose field on October 12th for homecoming activities. The concession building obviously will not be ready. Work on that is really just begun. In a couple minutes, we're going to talk about an issue that came up with respect to the requirement for additional excavation. But just in terms of scheduling, foundation work is beginning later this week with the concrete form person coming on Thursday, I believe. They had a little issue with concrete sub and had to get a new one. So that's going to start on Thursday. And that schedule should remain for maybe second week of December to be finished for the concession building. With respect to October 12th, I did have a conversation with the plumbing inspector who consulted with the State Plumbing Board, who confirmed that assuming all other things are in place for our ability to get a certificate of occupancy for the field and the bleachers, meaning access, walkways, all of that good stuff, that provided we make arrangements for the appropriate portable toilet facilities, And I'm still talking to him about specifically what those will need to be, whether it's a trailer or trailers or porta-johns. Attleboro is a project that Gail is also doing. They're similarly situated. They're actually only required to put in porta-johns, so we just need to clarify that a little bit more. But provided we provide those facilities and everything else is in place, we'll be able to get a certificate of occupancy to use the field for October 12th. So that's still the plan. The installation of the artificial turf, it's going to be really right up to that date. It might be finished on the 10th. So it's really, really tight. So that's why, you probably haven't seen any emails about it. You haven't heard any people talking about what is going to happen on it because we haven't really known. And as of this morning, it still looks like it's on schedule. But again, it's a little over 4 weeks away, 4 or 5 weeks away, and we're still not completely certain. So, but everything points to, and Rob Delmonico continues to tell us that yes, we will be ready. So we're relying on that. So a couple of things we do need to talk about this evening. John, do you want to talk about anything in general first before we go into?
No, we'll take whatever order you want, right?
Okay.
I mean, we can go over the budget, but
And
you want to talk signing?
You want to talk budget first?
No, I think, go
All right.
the other two.
So you have the scoreboard rendering, similar to what we looked at 2 weeks ago. This is not how it's going to look, and the wording and lettering is not final by any means. We need to talk about that this evening. But the consensus was, if you recall, 2 weeks ago, that a panel on the top and a panel on the bottom for the Hingham High School on the top, and at the bottom for the donor. And last week, there was some back and forth. Our project manager had actually suggested, what about Home of the Harbormen or something like that? There was some concern that that was a gender issue. And there's been some discussion about that. Margaret even went to her coaches and asked them about that, and the consensus was it really wasn't a gender concern, that our team names are the Harbormen, even though we call our ladies' teams the Harbor Women. But again, that's something we can talk about this evening, whether we like the idea of putting that on there or something like that on there, or something different. The scoreboard has been ordered, all red, and the lettering can be added at any time afterward. So that's not something that needs immediate attention, but I figured, we've already talked about this plenty, so maybe we can come to consensus this evening about what we want to do there. Does anyone have any opinions initially?
Well, I've already expressed my opinion to Ray. I do not see it as gender neutral. I have a problem with it.
I second that.
It's just, doesn't say, it's Harbor Men. It's not, I don't view it as a neutral term.
Is there a way to make it gender sensitive? The harbor people, maybe?
Well, I think Dot had a suggestion, Home of the Harbor Men, ampersand women.
Mm-hmm.
It's a little awkward, but not too bad.
What if you, building on that, because harbor men is one word, so you either use harbor men and harbor women, or, harbor men and women doesn't work. But what if you put harbor men on one side, harbor women in the other, and put the best thing in the middle?
Yeah, I mean, what was committed to best, or what are their expectations? Because
No
the last
expectations.
rendering was the one big,
Right.
Yeah.
your logo was what we had talked about.
No specific expectations, just use of the logo in a commemoration. What I had talked with the donor specifically was, I had come up with the simple language, generously donated by.
Yep.
There was some concern about that last time, so we shortened it to donated by. I don't think it's an issue one way or the other.
Well, Dot's idea is
That
a good
is
idea
interesting, yeah.
because it also then focuses best in the middle, which
Yeah.
maybe gives
Mhm.
them a little bit more punch or
Because then we might have a discussion about which should go first, but I think that would be a better
Flip a
than just
coin?
to have harbor men.
Aesthetically, this
John's
is
smiling
better.
over there.
You know, I think best in the middle is not gonna look as good, but, you know, and like, on one of our things we have, can we put another one of those pictures up there with the ship captain with the wheel in there? So they know, I mean, because we use that a lot also.
Right, but do we have does someone want to draw a female version of that?
No, I don't know.
I mean, I wouldn't
It's a
worry so
unisex
much.
hat,
I
actually.
wouldn't worry so much about, I mean, the location, I mean, the best in the middle is fine, I think, if he's not, there's no preconceived
Nope.
notion of what he's getting. We're certainly, that's a prominent location, and you've got harbor men and harbor women, I mean, trying to be sensitive to all the concerns, I think that might do it. I mean, Dot's recommendation is a good one.
Yeah, I'm just thinking out loud, would it make any sense to just have home of the, and then just, do we need to repeat home of the harbor men and home of the harbor women on both sides? You just have home of the, and then the two words are probably gonna come,
Right,
you
on
know.
either side.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, below it, right?
Yeah, right.
Yeah,
And then like you say, best in the middle,
You put best in the middle, won't that, I mean, I see what you're saying.
or if you stretch it out a little more, if you stretch out the home of the piece. The harbor men and the harbor women,
And
best.
donated by best? Maybe,
Yeah.
I guess I'd have to see that
Okay.
visually. Could do it.
The feedback is, this is a lot cleaner. Obviously, we have to work on the language, and I think when you see another rendition, be able to make other decisions.
And then would the ship's wheel be the same as the one in the gym as opposed to this with the harbor men on it, or?
well, I mean, we already have, you're talking about, we already have one on here, which is the one that, because that even says Hingham Harbor Men.
Yeah, that's because I think the one
That's
in
what
the
the
gym
athletics
doesn't
use.
have that Hingham Harbor Men wording on it.
Right, I think this came from, and I think this specific design came from the vendor that supplies our current stuff. Margaret got it from the vendor that supplies stuff for the high school now, the teams now. Like, they already have that design in there.
So are we gonna take harbor men off of there too? And just leave Hingham on it?
I couldn't even read that.
Yeah, but when it's,
Right.
when
But
it's
it's
that
big,
big, you'll
yeah.
read it.
I mean, personally, in the ship's wheel, it doesn't strike me as much as,
But it's
The
redundant,
huge
it's
words.
redundant at that point, right?
yeah, it is redundant.
Yeah.
And frankly, Ray, at the high school, there are so many different logos that the different sports teams use that.
And frankly, you could probably,
Wow.
That's a whole nother issue we could talk
Yeah.
about.
well,
No, I
yeah,
know.
actually, in fact, I'm just thinking out loud, maybe we take what's the Hingham Harborman, both those things that are red, just delete that entirely, just have the big H in there, because you
Yeah,
got
with the
Hingham,
black line around.
you have Hingham High School right above it, right?
Right.
It's not like anybody's gonna be confused and just,
Yeah.
Actually, a
Focus
big
on the
H
logo
in there
piece.
wouldn't be bad.
that's what I'm saying, just leave the
Well,
big
no,
H.
just a big H right here. I mean, the wheel, I sort of like a wheel,
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
because that's nautical,
Yeah.
but, I mean, just the H instead of the home of the harborman, but. Bottom line, I think this looks a lot neater. Obviously, we just have to work on some of those words to make everyone happy.
What looks like neater? What do you mean it looks neater?
Than what we
The-
saw the last
What
time.
we saw last time.
Oh.
This here, in my opinion,
Right.
looks crisper, neater,
Mhm.
looks good.
Yes, but the discussion has to do with the word harbor men and harbor women.
Right, and so that's
So-
what I'm saying, subject to us coming
Go
up.
back to Ed, that's what we looked at the last time.
Right.
And the other way possibly to do it is if you took home of the harbor men and harbor women, all right, and put that to one side, left the best logo on one side, maybe that's better than splitting up in the middle. So, and just, you know, so leave the best logo, say, on the left side, you know, and then just says, and center the home of the, and then in the correct, whatever side is appropriate
Can,
type, harbor men, harbor women, with
All right,
some
so
space in the middle.
we have consensus about including reference to both genders, right?
Yes.
Absolutely.
Okay. We like the wheel, maybe taking the words out of it.
Yeah, I think,
Yes.
I think it's
Can
unnecessary,
we,
right?
can we do this? Because I'll get a revised rendering, and Ed, Andy, and I will deal with this based on those parameters. Because I think we
I
need to
think-
make a decision before 2 weeks from now.
I think we ought to
Right,
send it
okay.
out by email to everybody in town.
I'm just saying that, I agree with you on that. I'm just a little bit worried that 3 men are going to decide an issue.
Oh.
So that's what I'm just
Oh, but I
making.
mean, I think what
We'll
we're
do a
doing
good
is
job on it, but
we've
it
made
was just sort of
a
funny.
decision that we're going to include the language, it's just basically placement, so it's not,
Right.
take
Yes.
some heat off you guys.
Right.
So if
I
you
think
wanna-
it's just design
Yeah.
aesthetic now, not,
Well, if you want to, and if you want to circulate it, just circulate it via email and say if anybody's, get back to you within
Yeah.
X period of time. If you feel more comfortable doing that, that's.
I mean, it
that's
sounds like
perfectly
we've got a plan. I mean,
Okay.
I don't want to
Exactly.
spend too much time on it. I
Yep.
mean, we've taken care of some issues, and I think we just put it together, and you three folks will make a proposal.
okay.
Can I just, when you get a chance,
Mm-hmm.
when I look at this scoreboard,
I actually like that.
the way I have this, in that
But this is-
particular
we said take
field,
that out.
there should
Take
be
the
a
word out.
football game,
Hingham
which is,
and Harborman.
which is our boys, and field hockey, which are girls, boys and girls soccer, and boys and girls lacrosse. Was that a fair statement?
That is a fair statement.
Is this particular, I don't know, design going to accommodate as well as it can all those different sports?
Yes.
How?
There will be manual, where's John? There will be manual changes to the scoreboard in order to do that.
I mean, where it says down and to go and stuff
Right.
like that. Got-
Down would change to some period or?
Right. John, the accommodation of this scoreboard to suit all 4 sports, the changes would be manual, isn't that right? This is the football version
Yes.
of the scoreboard. So Ed's question is, and the answer is yes, but in terms of how it happens, aren't the changes to, like, down, to go, ball on, this is football. So the things that would be specific to lacrosse, for instance, or field hockey, there would be manual changes that will,
You mean it hangs, that's a good question, I'm
I
not
think,
sure.
I think that's true.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
The short answer is yes, it's designed to accommodate all 4 sports.
I hope so, yeah.
It is, yes, it definitely is.
I have to confirm the manner in which it does that. I think the changes are manual.
Okay,
It's certainly not just a football scoreboard,
that's the point,
certainly.
yeah.
Okay. All right. Let's see. Scoreboard. Okay, so maybe we'll talk about budget and then change orders? Do you want to do that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Shooting.
I have a copy of the updated budget, and so from the last time to this time, the changes really start under RAD, where you have irrigation pump start wires. So we've added a few things, but we've also got a sound
They come
system
around.
credit in here for an additional $24,400.
So John, on that, I just have a quick question on the sound system. So the sound engineers reviewed our discussion from the last meeting, and is that the change of,
That's the change of the less cost of equipment plus the elimination of the 2 poles.
and so they
Yeah.
reviewed everything we talked about, and they made those changes accordingly?
Yeah, that number may change a bit, but this is what we think it is at this point right now. There was a change order, but, with some of the speakers, it...
There's something in progress that we'll talk more about in a couple minutes.
Okay.
Do you have another copy of that, John? I don't have one.
Oh, okay, everybody had one tucked in.
Yeah, it's not-
But I have plenty of copies,
Thanks.
if anyone needs it, okay.
Thanks.
Here you go.
Then there's the HCAM, we're putting an underground run for HCAM that goes from the concession area over to the, across the road at the high school, at the side of the high school. And we expect that HCAM will pick up a large portion of this tab, but right now, the amount of $9,155 has been added in. The second ad panel for the scoreboard, as you just discussed, the scoreboard, there's 2 ad panels on there, top and a bottom, for the extra footings and posts. That's change order of $5,123. Electrical upgrade for the facility, which this was the item that was not in the budget last week, and you authorized, a couple weeks ago, you authorized me to approve up to 16.5 of those expenditures. I put that into the budget. And
So rather, it's not really an electrical upgrade, just to be clear.
it's
That's
the
actually,
total service
that's the
in-
service
cost of the
charge to
service, right.
HMLP,
That's right. It's the cost of the service.
which was not included in the contract for RAD. So the infrastructure was, but not the service charge to
Yeah, that's right.
HMLP.
Good point, Radish. That should
Yeah.
say electrical service
Mhm.
for facility, which was not in the budget.
That's something
go-
that can be paid over time.
No, that one there, that
Oh,
16.5.
that's the one that's
was-
we're gonna
that's-
get billed?
We'll get billed for it, right?
Okay.
Okay. The estimate that they provided last week was 16.5, and they
Mhm.
said you'd only be billed for the services that were incurred. Hopefully, it'll come in under. Under construction of the concession, there is a change order amount there for additional excavation for the slab and foundation.
Yeah,
And
I'll go
that's
into detail about that in a minute.
$15,917. Then underneath the design engineer, the 2 bottom ones under Gale reimbursable for printing and postage and miscellaneous concession. What I've really done is Gale has been incurring all the printing charges, but on the back side of this sheet, I had an area for other services, bid, printing, and advertising. So what I did was I moved $3,000 from that line, which was $5,000 last time, underneath the Gale to better reflect it in the budget. And then there's a pending, Gail has requested a change order, and that change order, haven't really reviewed that, or I did, not ready to make any recommendation on that time because it's still under review. But what I wanted to do was show it here on the budget sheet so you can see how all of these changes actually impact the state of the contingency that we still have. for the
Yeah, we need to
project.
take a closer look at that. I don't expect that we'd probably be looking to approve all of that, but maybe a portion of it. So that's something you need to look at. And
Yep.
we could talk about maybe next time.
So those are the changes. So when you look at the total project budget totals now, it comes out to $5,430,000, 93. So that's down really the 24.4 for the most part. Okay, because what I've been doing, and the contingency is now sitting at 137,217. So basically, all of the change orders, I've been taking them off of the contingency, but if the change works in our favor to the extent that we've dropped something from the project, I'm actually lowering the cost of the overall project. In terms of fundraising, the number has not changed. It still stays at $1,093,000. Collections, $783,925. We really didn't make any collections from the last time. And the letters of credit we still have in hand for $275, so there's an outstanding amount of $34,075. But the project gap is minus $51,000 now. And, the contingency still is at $137,217, so I think we need to continue managing the project and, managing that contingency and watching the expenditures.
Is the outstanding donation commitments of 34,075, it's not reflected in the minus 51?
That's not, no.
It's not.
But we still have those, we still have the revolving account balances, Ed, in order to carry that, you know, any timing differences associated with the collection of these other monies.
Plus you've got the contingency that's to the positive as well.
Yeah, I mean, and you can think about the contingency right now is in position to carry the project gap, and the money, the other funds will in fact be collected. You know, there's 34,000 that we don't have, like, paper in hand to say this will be coming in, yet we, you know, we do, so, but, you know, we, from the donors, they've sort of told us when they're going to start paying this money, and from, you know, through the course of 14, we should be in good shape on that $34,000. Plus, we do have those balances in the building revolving, the field revolving, and the athletic revolving, which could carry the time differences between payment and monies. So that's the project up, the budget update. Any other questions on that?
In terms of the change orders, so John mentioned the $5,123. That was for this scoreboard because we added a third panel, or a second panel, went to the top. We needed to put in larger footings, dig deeper, wider footings, wind, the weight of it. It's a structural design element. So as a result of that, John authorized that change order because we think it's just, you know, it makes sense. It's a quality, a better, I think, product with the two, and I think we all agree that that was the case. The other change order that...
Embarrassing to Best Chevrolet if it tipped over, right?
Exactly. The other change order that John mentioned briefly, in terms of the concession building and the additional excavation that was needed. So, if you remember from the last meeting, we authorized and engaged PAR Corporation, and PAR is serving as project manager, but also we engaged them to do some engineering services and testing services as required under the contract for the concession building and as required by the building code to monitor the foundation excavation and installation and make sure it is being done appropriately. In the course of monitoring that, it was determined that about 2 to 3 feet down from the surface, there was about a foot layer of organic material. And organic material cannot stay because organic material by its nature changes over time. So it's not solid. It's not something that can be compacted and stay there. It is susceptible to moving. So as a result, Gale, the structural engineer for Gale, advised that organic material had to be excavated out, backfill with appropriate combination of non-organic backfill and crushed stone. Some of that excavation work is owned by Seaver in its contract. Some of it is not. So as a result, the recommendation was for a unit price per cubic yard. Volume is approximately 264 cubic yards, and a not-to-exceed number recommended by PAR Corp, Tom Perry, of 15,918. So, you know, payment will be on actual amounts, but not to exceed that number. It's something that Andy and Ed and I talked about. We did, at this morning's meeting, we did kind of talk through the two issues. One is under the main area of the concession building, and then the second area was under the pavilion, which was just going to be pavement. And kind of talked it through at the construction meeting today, and there was an additional recommendation to excavate under that. And, you know, our question was, well, what's the worst case scenario if we don't do that? Because that was an additional $5,000 or so to do that. And the footings for the supports for the pavilion structure actually go below that organic layer, so that was not a concern. It was really just the blacktop. So the worst case scenario is over some time, maybe there's some settling and there could be cracking, and we could just repair or replace the blacktop.
Or maybe not.
Or maybe not. So that was a risk that made sense under those circumstances, rather than paying now to over-excavate, you know, a certain $5,000 or $6,000, which maybe we would never need to spend. So we're just talking about the excavation work under the main footprint of the building and not under the pavement of the pavilion area. So there are numerous memos about the observation of all of this work, with photos and everything. I'm happy to forward them if you want to see them all. It's, you know, riveting stuff if you're an engineer.
So is organic material loam?
No,
Okay.
I don't know. It could be.
It could be wood,
Yeah.
it could
In
be
fact-
something that's going to
Something
break
that's
down.
added.
Right. And in fact, we talked about that this morning, and to the extent that, you know, whatever is removed from there, we already put a call into DPW and said, you know, in terms of hauling this off-site and paying for someone to haul it, you know, we'd rather give it to the DPW. So, number one, we don't pay to haul it, and number two, we don't run into a situation where someone's questioning whether we're removing inappropriate material from town. That's being taken care of as well. So you have that change order. Andy, Ed, and I will sign. We talked about that yesterday, and that's for the not to exceed $15,918, as we talked about, that John has in the budget already. The other item, just to touch on briefly, and it came up today, and then late this afternoon, I had a conversation with Lindsay from Gale and Matt Moore from Kavanaugh Touchy, the sound engineer. So as you know, last time we made a decision to remove those additional poles behind the visitor bleachers with the speakers that nobody really knew were in the plan in the first place. To be more consistent with what we all talked about and what we all thought was going to be the case, was that speakers on that side of the field would be mounted on the light poles. Some of the concern, there was a little bit of a concern that the sound would not be, they would have to be positioned such that the sound would not be good enough for the visitor side, and you could argue, how much do we care about that? But there was also a concern of maybe spillage, more so than was originally intended. So had a quick conversation with Gail and with the sound engineer about the possibility of changing the speaker to the next level up so that it could be positioned a little higher, pointed down, and still kind of right at, on either side of the visitor bleachers this way. And the thinking was, with the larger speaker and the quality of that speaker, would reduce the spillage and be consistent with what the plan said in terms of decibel levels going off to Union Street and whatnot. So sent off an email to Jim Doherty of RAD, because he's already put in the order for the sound system, to ask if that change could be made. So the 24,400 that you see in terms of savings, there may be a little upcharge. So that number of savings may reduce based on if there's an increase for the speakers, but it would be minimal. We don't know what the answer to that would be, if it can be done, but that's something that is in process. So obviously, to be consistent with what we presented and to make sure that we're getting the same product, it'll be quality sound and not increase the spillage offsite. So a lot of little details like that going on
Every day.
Every day. That was, literally had that conversation at 10 after 5 today, so. I mentioned before about, being able to use the field in October and needing bathroom facilities. So Margaret's already looked into costs of trailers versus porta potties, and we're continuing to have those discussions with the authorities to determine exactly what it is we need to install there, and then we have about 4 or 5 weeks to get it in place. So that's something that John and Paul Field are going to help coordinate with Margaret's help. So more on that next time. What else am I forgetting?
Communication.
Yeah, so, Andy raised a great point last time, about folks who have been participating in this, been following this project, been contributing to this project, and wanting to know, okay, what's happening? Are we going to be able to use this? When is there, when's what going, people drive by, they see poles going up, they see bleachers going up, they are getting excited. And we've been reluctant to have kind of a mass communication with folks because we really weren't sure, and still aren't sure to some extent, when, things are going to happen. But it does seem like it's appropriate to have some communication with folks, particularly donors, to let them know that, we are hopeful to be able to use it for homecoming. And in terms of planning, some sort of event, I talked with Margaret a little bit about this today as well. She really feels that doing something next spring and even next fall is the more appropriate time, just because everything won't be done in the next 5 weeks. And you still have a site under construction significantly, all but the all-purpose field. So in terms of doing a big thing in October, it doesn't really seem like it is possible to pull something together in time, nor does it make sense to do it when everything is not complete.
It'll be dug up, the concession stand won't be built.
Yeah.
It's just field across the street, just a lot in progress.
So the question is, should we do something that's not quite as elaborate? Is there a way to recognize people or thank people or whatever? It will be the first, hopefully, will be the first major activity there. Maybe there's something between a ribbon cutting and a complete, that to Andy and Ed's point, that recognizes everybody, all the hard work and all the, whatever. I don't know if that's just, something that's done over the PA system, assuming that that's working properly, or whatever.
I think that there was originally a plan that because it is homecoming, there would be other games that day as well. So.
Supposed to be
so I would
soccer, field
suggest,
hockey.
Yeah, that because homecoming is a big thing in the life
Sure.
of kids, and there's relatively little time at halftime to do what they need to do, so that maybe if there were going to be something, it could be between the other games.
Is there time between whatever the last game is and the football game?
Yeah, I don't know what the
Right.
times were even
On the schedule is.
mentioned. but-
Right, as of now, according to Margaret, she's hopeful to have, boys and girls soccer play in the morning, I think, one after the other, then field hockey, and then football at 4 p.m. So, the question is, okay, which group, you're going to get soccer, then you're going to get field hockey, you're going to get football. They're not, some of them might overlap, some of them might not. So
It could be as simple as each
Yeah.
home team that gets to play that day gets a tearaway banner that they run through when they first appear on the field, and that's the celebration. And the banner could say, "Welcome to the new home of the Harbor men and women," or whichever one is they are. And then that can be it, and then at least then the PA announcer can say, "This is a great day, first time we get to use this new field." And that can maybe, thank you to everyone for doing it, and then have something when the baseball field is ready.
Everything's
and-
completed
yeah.
and.
But in that way, Andy, then and the banner could say, thank you to,
Well, my big
Yeah.
thing was, first and foremost, that we need to form, somebody has to take leadership so that we make sure we thank everyone. And, I got a list of a gazillion people to
Yeah.
thank. I first and foremost, Rob Hale, DJ McKenna, for bringing Ward Street here. I think also, so that's the first thing there. That's what I was just making sure that we actually make this a thing where we recognize everybody, because this is our first pop to do that. In terms of Margaret saying everything for next year, I don't know, when I was in high school, we always had a big bonfire or pep rally the night before. If the focal point is the lights, not the complete stadium, I don't know, can we have a turn on the lights, just
good
Friday
idea.
night, where everyone comes there, the entire.
Pep rally, yeah.
A little, just a little thing, I don't know if they're gonna have the high school gym done for homecoming like they did for, not to the extent where they do for senior night, but people could come there. So then everyone's just around, maybe have some background lights, or I don't know if you can stagger the lights, but we can have enough people there that say, come, flick the switch, and leave. So, that's all I'm just saying. The key thing is here is that we make sure that this is a community project. A lot of people put in 20 odd years to get this thing done. We try to work with the neighbors, and that we appropriately recognize the people. I mean, obviously, also I think about the 2004 or 5 field committee that first started the first report. And then, so that's all I'm saying, is we have to recognize them, and then if the focal point, if the whole complex is not done, the focal point's the lights, let's flick the switch.
So in that regard, is there any question as to whether the lights will be completed?
The lights should be operational.
Right, okay.
I-
Yeah, no, I'm just, yeah, well, we don't want to play the whole event.
Well, that's part of the concern about,
Well, you can always plan and cancel. You can't cancel, you can't not plan and then everyone show up.
We could put a blast email out to everybody.
Let me just bounce in and.
X2.
Well, we can also have we can also have a practice run on our parking requirement if we have everyone there Friday night, so.
Let me just jump in and play devil's advocate. If the field is,
Done on the 10th.
the baseball field is done and seeded this fall, which I hope it will be, there won't be any baseball games in the spring.
right,
They just won't.
right.
The
Right.
fact
So
that,
it's
the
not
fact that the
back.
concession stand won't be finished until December we're not gonna change that. I think to pass up, it doesn't have to be big, it doesn't have to be over the top, but to pass up some sort of a, run through a ribbon, or let's.
Flick the light switch.
Some kid gets to flip the switch.
Right.
I am strongly in favor of.
Not
some-
suggesting we're not doing anything. I think we're only suggesting that to do a big thing like maybe some of us originally had, thought about, doesn't make sense now. But I think, I agree with you. I think something needs to be done. There will be some acknowledgement, there will be some, talk to some donors and see what makes sense.
I mean, the other thing is presumably, the game's starting at 4 o'clock, and the lights hopefully will be working. If we had to do something at the beginning of the game and it didn't start till 4:15, and presuming the lights are working, that wouldn't be an issue. I don't know if that's a problem with the league, I wouldn't think so, but if, in other words, rather than holding up any of the games and not worried about it, presuming everything else was done by 3:30 or whatever, if you had to hold the game 10 or 15 minutes to make a short presentation or whatever, give the ceremonial first tee or run through, whatever it is.
Or maybe you start a little bit late, maybe by halftime, it's starting to get a little dark.
Oh, and do it, flip the switch then?
Well, you want the lights on when you start the game, so
Yeah.
that they might adjust, but, I
Right.
mean,
I like, Friday night, just have an open house at the
I think
thing.
it's cool.
People come, flick the switch, stay for half hour, leave.
And then to your house for the after party?
yeah.
Well, I will not, I'll not be serving alcohol,
right.
because that would be against school policy.
And the law.
Well,
could
I
probably-
can drink in my house.
Okay, so
Good ideas.
more, yes, all good ideas.
Well, but, I think we need to probably make some kind of decision, right, as to whether we want to pursue any of these good ideas, because it's a month away, right?
It's not quite 5 weeks.
Yeah, right.
And I think the suggestion to get a committee, whichever committee it would be, to get working on this really
Well,
does make sense.
I mean, Carol's the chair of community outreach.
Is that the group that will do it?
I think she and I have already talked a lot about this, and I think, we can talk more about it and consult with some of the donors and the sports parents and get some input from them and see what makes sense.
We're also hoping to get a firmer delivery date
Yeah.
on the artificial turf next week.
Yeah, we've gotten a range. Someone's saying the 18th, someone's saying the 23rd. That will make a big difference to let us know how close we're going to be up against.
Well, Andy's point is a
Our time.
good point. You can't schedule it the day before, but you can cancel if you have to.
Correct. Rather not advertise something that we're gonna cancel. So I'd like to go forward, having some better information
not
and then planning a simple, fun kickoff.
So we meet again in 2 weeks. We should be in a position, obviously, to make that decision at that point, right? So, but the plan has, the thinking has to start, right?
So, community outreach has taken the lead on this.
No,
It's not? Oh, because you said.
I'm going to take the lead on this, and I'll work with Carol on
I'm
it.
going to be involved
Okay?
as community outreach person, chair.
We have a number of invoices that I'm going to distribute. How many of these are there? 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay. All right, so we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We're not going to deal with the last one.
No, we're
Right.
still in the review, but I just wanted to
Okay.
call it to your attention.
Yeah, so we have invoices, 2 invoices from Gale Associates for work on the project, $4,177.50, $9,196.58. Garrity and Nisley, our counsel, $4,000. Seaver, their first requisition, $32,882. And Rad Sports, their invoice number 2, $1,350,448.75. So those will be circulating. You want to make a motion on those?
I like that.
What are these for?
Well, design work. The 2 Gale invoices are, hold on, right here.
I'm going to put together an idea. I like that.
One's for the athletic field, and the other is for the concession.
Right.
The
This is the con-
4177
this
is for the athletic field.
Additional?
40, no, this is just, they're invoicing toward the contract.
Okay.
So this is the 4177, this is for the fields portion.
Okay.
Contract. This one is for the concession contract. Okay? And then you've got Bob Garrity's.
Okay. All right, so we have a number of bills before us. I'm going to make a motion that we approve payment of Gale Associates in the amount of $4,177.50. That's the first one. Gale Associates' second invoice for $9,196.58. Garrity and Nisley for $4,000. Seaver Construction for $32,882. And Rad Sports for $1,350,448.75. Finally, we have Gale Associates proposal change order number 3.
We're not gonna vote on
We can do that one.
No.
So that's my motion. 1, 2 for Gale, 1 for Garrity, 1 for Seaver, and 1 for Rad.
Second.
All right, I'll send these around. Any question, comment, or discussion, you can all see these and sign them. Just need 4 signatures. But you can all take a look and review them. I have the, where is this? Rad's is in quadruplicate.
We need to vote for one?
Well, yeah, we can vote and then sign.
Want to go first?
Yeah, any comments, questions, discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
So here's,
Sign those.
Seaver's signatures in quadruplicate also. Spoiled in building committee, usually Mary Mahoney gets all the signature lines ready in advance.
Next time, sorry.
You don't have to do it, I'm just, that would be Tom. Yeah, Tom.
Tom's our Mary.
Tom's our Mary. And this is going to stay in here for now.
Just keep passing them down to get one more.
Do you have, oh, here it is. Do you have multiples of the change order for the excavation?
Oh, sorry. The,
So Ed and Andy and I can sign? I have it here, if you want to. Want to just make copies?
Yeah.
Of this? So we just have multiples, sign multiples of it? Thank you. Thank you. So that's the change order for the excavation that we talked about. All right. Yeah. Anything else on the fields before we move on? Okay. So we have 3 homeschool applications.
We do.
As Dot indicated in the annotated agenda, they all provided, I was going to say there was one that was quite thin, but I know they provided additional documentation.
Yeah, I do have it.
My only question is for one of them, there was a P.O. box address provided. They should provide a residential address in Hingham, shouldn't they?
Well, if they're receiving their mail, we can certainly add the address, yes.
A P.O. box is not enough for residency, right? I happen to know that they are.
Yeah, right. I understand your point. I think that as they were filling it out, they were
Yeah.
probably thinking that
Sure.
that is their official mailing address. But we do know that they are residents.
Yeah. Right. So we've gone through some of these previously, as you know, in accordance with the Charles decision from, I think, 1987. I think so. There's not a whole lot of input we can have with respect to these requests.
Well, for example, one of them, it was quite thin, and I asked
Yeah.
for more information, and they did provide that.
Good.
And
we
that's about as far as we can go, work with them
Right.
to make an acceptable plan.
Right. So, do you want to make a motion? So we've got Angela Bishop, Sophia Matera, and Rebecca Sanchez Martinez.
Separately?
Yeah.
Make a motion for approval of the homeschooling of Angela Bishop, grade 10, for the 2013-14 school year.
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
I'll make a motion for the approval of the homeschooling application of Sophia Matera, grade 5, for the 2013-14 school year.
Second.
Further discussion? All those in favor? Aye.
Finally, motion for the approval of homeschooling of Rebecca Sanchez Martinez, grade 7, for the 2013-14 school year.
Any further discussion? All those in favor? Sorry.
Aye.
Aye. Sorry about that. Okay. Thank you for that. We do have one resignation, 7.8. We wish them well. 7.9 through 7.29 is 21 appointments. And just one or two left?
Actually, one officially. I don't know that we have any more para. We might have one or two paras. We hired about 35 paraprofessionals as well as the 40 teachers. Para group is a fairly fluid group anyway, so that was not that unusual.
How many teachers?
40,
40, and how many pairs?
35,
Yeah.
and a few sundry other things like bus drivers and so on.
And Carol and I attended the welcome reception for the new teachers, and they're all very impressive. It's really a impressive group.
One of the positions here, one of the young men on this list that we hired for the secondary planning center at the high school.
Post-planning.
Post.
Post-secondary, thank you. Post-secondary planning center is a paraprofessional working at that rate. He is a licensed guidance counselor, has spent a year internship in Brookline, has done some financial aid work at Stanford, is a Tufts graduate, and so, you know, we are very, very fortunate to be able to take advantage of the market here and get very, very well qualified people. So that truly enhances the function of that space, even as we had imagined it to be a resource. I think it'll be even more of a resource because of the quality of the person there.
Okay. And we still need to...
We have one, a meeting tomorrow with the person who's being recommended for the middle school technology, and then we do have a secondary psychologist chair position, and that was started with a late resignation from East in, it was August, toward the end of August. We had word it was likely to happen before that. The actual resignation came then. And then we went through that process, and the person from, was appointed, but the psychologist at South then was appointed to be the early childhood coordinator at East. That left an opening there at the very end of August, and Mary Eastwood advertised and interviewed for that, and the psychologist from the middle school took that position. And so the position opening now is at the middle school. And so that's, you know, that's not as large a pool of candidates, obviously, to begin with, let alone at this point. So in the meantime, all of those people who've moved have been very willing to say, we'll kind of help out and share some duties until we can get fully in place. But that advertising is, and interviewing is ongoing for middle school.
Great. Just one quick thing I thought I would point out. I was in Florida last week, and I happened to, just in a local paper, there's a school called IMG Academy. Maybe some of you have heard of it, but they consistently produce Division I football players. And so it struck me as funny. This was on the front page of the local paper in Sarasota. IMG Academy broke ground in April on a 15-year, 5-phase, multi-million-dollar project that includes a multi-sport complex, field house, student dormitory, and research facilities. It's just interesting to see what they're doing in other places. I don't know. Anyway. Okay.
We weren't doing any recruiting down there for any high school athletes.
It was
right?
not. It was not. Do we have any 48-hour items?
No.
Subcommittee reports. I know policy has a meeting coming up, but hasn't been anything. We do have negotiations Wednesday, and then next week as well.
Next Monday.
Right. With the paraeducators.
Can I bring up the topic of attendance, if possible, for somebody at the cable meeting on Wednesday?
Yeah. So I know, talked to you and Andy about this. I know Andy said he might be available. You're not available, Ed?
Well, I won't let it go empty, but I'm supposed to be at a dinner that night. But I noticed that the salary negotiations is that night as well.
It is.
When I looked at the schedule.
Right.
Can you do it?
Let me ask you a
It's
question.
at 7:30 Wednesday night, which is exactly when the Historical
Yeah,
Society's annual dinner is.
I'm going to have something in writing from Tom Perry Wednesday morning, which details the costs for what's involved. And we covered in the budget, it was that $9,000 item, a small portion of which would be attributable to what we decided to put in there because it was opened up, but the whole idea was, opening it up so they could put infrastructure in. So, we feel the bulk of it is going to be covered by cable advisory.
It's Wednesday night, right?
Wednesday night.
Yeah, I can be there.
It's a 7:30, I think, here at Town Hall. So I'll have something in writing from Tom on
Is an
Wednesday.
agenda like where, do I have to be there at 7:30, or do you show up, or do you go on like at 8, or you don't know their agenda there?
I don't.
I went to a meeting, I think Carol did as well, but the
Yeah.
meeting that I went to, they were very courteous.
Yeah.
They just reviewed their minutes from the previous meeting, and then they brought you forward.
Yeah.
Jumped you in.
Good.
And then I left, and they were still talking about
On the,
other topics.
Are they listed on the email?
I didn't see them posted earlier, but maybe they posted this afternoon.
They are posted.
Wednesday?
Yeah. Yeah, it's Wednesday at 7:30. So I'll get you the.
But they won't have you sit in the back of the
No,
room.
it's, and just so you know, Sandy Peavy is the chair of that committee. She's a terrific woman at Linden Ponds. And Eric Dresser will probably be there as well. And he's worked with us with HCAM. And Eric spent a lot of time with Tom Perry, going through, exactly what made sense and what they would need. And we came up with costs through RAD. And that's what we have to present to them. And then based on that, they'll present to the Board of Selectmen. If you recall, they went to the Selectmen previously who were in favor of the concept but needed something more in concrete in order to approve it.
Well, yeah, they went to the Board of...
It's early on your list, Andy,
Okay.
if you look at it.
And this is HCAM.
It's Cable Advisory Committee.
Cable TV Advisory, and it's approval of minutes, and then education channel approval of payment.
Yeah, from
and then report
Cable
on
Capital.
education.
Right.
I see.
So it's the first
Really?
item after
Okay.
minutes.
Okay.
Okay? I'll get you that on Wednesday.
Speaking of cable, at our next administrative council, which is on the 17th, we meet monthly with principals and central office, and Eric Dresser and the new programming coordinator, is that her name? The new position that they appointed. Is going to be there to meet with the principals to begin to get some ideas of the kinds of things that they can program from the school side.
Okay. I don't think we have any other reports. Dot, that you want to...
Well, I want to remind you all of the Chapter 70 presentation. That's tomorrow night at 7 o'clock at Town Hall. It's in the big room on the second floor, the central meeting room. and that was, is being hosted by the Special Ed Working Group, and particularly arranged by Laura Burns, and with a lot of facilitation help from Garrett Bradley. And then on the 17th at 8 p.m., there will be the initial forecast meeting where Ted will present particularly to the Board of Selectmen, the school committee, AdCom, and the Personnel Board. I don't know what room that is in, but it will be a town hall. The only other thing I was going to mention briefly is a couple of you have mentioned the new Boston Magazine rating list, and some of you know how I kind of feel about that kind of a thing, but it is out. And it's not that I don't think that individual data lines are not important. They are. It's good information. But what I object to is the notion of putting together 20, I think there are 21 different categories, which include enrollment, average class size, teacher to student ratio, student to teacher ratio, per pupil cost, AP testing, MCAS testing, graduation rate, and taking a mean of all of those and then putting them together in some sort of a weighted formula and coming up with a number that ranks communities. So I think that the value of something like this really is to look at the individual columns, look at that data and see where we rank individually. The ranking was number 38 out of the top 50 of the top 147 in the greater Boston, the 495 loop. But of course, there are 352 cities and towns, so easily 300 high schools throughout the state. So I tend to think in terms of the 50 and or 38 out of all of those. So there is some merit in looking at the data, but a ranking that uses a formula that isn't completely even clear when they talk about a weighted ranking, I'm not sure exactly what they mean by that. One of the things that is worth comparing is that when you look at any of the categories, and I would suggest if you take a look at this, you look at our columns, and you look at a neighboring community that ranks slightly above us. And then you look at the ranking in every single column, and in particular, you look at the per pupil cost ranking. And so we were ranked 38th and 37th in terms of per pupil cost, from high to low. But if you look at, for example, our 10th grade math, we would be number 16. If you look at our grade 3 math, we'd be number 10, thereabouts. If you look at our college attendance, and they use 4-year college attendance here, that would be 13th, and so on. So the ratings are all over the place, but the one that is the lowest is the per pupil cost. Now, I'm not suggesting that if we had more money, we would be at the top of the list. We wouldn't be. But that's why I'm bothered that they would put together a bunch of things that really aren't.
Let me take
That's what I think.
advantage of your math background, because I found what you just said very interesting. I understand the cost per pupil. And what did you say we were?
There's only one school that spends
30,
less
yeah.
than us,
37.
above, that ranked higher than us.
49th out of
48th
50.
and, or
Okay.
49th and, yeah.
No, of the 38 schools, there's only one that spent less than us.
Right.
Yeah, of the
Which is-
38.
Which is
That's-
consistent with our benchmarking
Right.
communities, we're 19th out of 20th, I think.
And that counts against us when
Right.
we're
Exactly.
ranked.
But
Right.
you took some of the other,
Well, if you just look at the
Scores.
other columns and count we're at 38, then how many are above us? And you get numbers such as I,
Right, so a town like Weston, who spends, which spends more than twice what we spend per pupil, somehow is ranked higher, and that's, I don't see how you use, like, enrollment and then test scores
yeah.
together
Right.
as any kind of criteria to come up with a rating.
I mean, again,
It's a
the
story.
easiest way to look at it as to how much impact any one column has is to pick two towns. And I'm suggesting you pick us and the one that is nearest us and slightly above. And then you look at every single category and you look at the comparison. And the one category Where we are not higher is the per pupil cost.
Also, if you, if you go online, the Globe, they actually have an interactive thing where you can click on any of the columns and rank it, which is more information than we can possibly absorb, but you see pretty much the same thing.
And, you know, even in terms of rankings with respect to just scores and such, the state does the same thing that Boston Magazine does, is they come out with a ranking, and they do it by combining third grade scores and eighth grade scores and fifth grade science scores, and then mush them all together, because there's this want to rank and talk about the best and the second best and the 38th best and so on. And I don't have that need. I want to look at what we're doing in a bunch of categories, because if you're setting goals for improvement and looking at areas that need help, that's what you do. You don't mush together things that aren't particularly related. But it is the way of the world. People like reading these kinds of things. They make good headlines on the front of the publication, whatever it is, and so some people enjoy it.
Dr. Gallo, I appreciate your comments, because everyone always comments on this, so it's good to have your point of view. One thing that I was confused on is, like, the stuff when we go to the high school and we get the counseling department's report, what took me back is that the graduation rate was 94%. Going on to college was 87%.
Yeah.
I mean, where are they getting the data? Because every time I've gone to that counseling report, I know we're 100% passing MCAS, you know, which I assume would pretty much translate into, if not 100%, 99% graduating from high school, and then our statistics show like either a 93, 94, 95%
attending post-education. But if you look at in fact, I brought last year's report, and actually, I think it was 88% four-year college. So this is four-year college, this number. With respect to the graduation rate, they don't, they look at graduation rate, and there are lots of ways that it gets counted with data that we send in, the EPIMS data, the data about our student bodies, and graduation rate reflects often, and there are 2 or 3 different formulas, but how many students started in the 9th grade and how many graduated, so that you have to take into account not just in the senior year who passed the test and got
So if we
paid.
started with 300 kids as a freshman class,
Well, I'm not saying this
and
is the
only two
formula,
se-
but graduation rate is based upon a multiple year look and what happens to kids along the way, and not just what happens in the senior year in terms of how many kids pass the test or not.
but in terms of graduation rate, what is our graduation rate then?
That's the accurate figure, but you have to know the formula that they use, that the state uses. And they have a formula that they use.
They have a 4-year cohort, a 5-year cohort.
So if a kid's no longer in our school system, he moves out of town, that counts against us?
Well, moving out of town doesn't
What about
count
going to a
against us,
private
but if he
school?
drops out, that's a different matter. If he doesn't move forward with his cohort group.
What's the percentage then? Do you know how many kids drop out in our school a year, approximately?
Couple each year. Most of the time, it's that they simply don't return. If they might go to get a equivalency diploma, they might go to night school. Those things, if they ultimately get a diploma, that counts, but not the same as if they stayed here for 4 years and graduated in a 4-year period. And that has an impact on MCAS.
Yeah, I mean, I think the point is, and perhaps we'll talk about this when we do our planning meeting, is we really need to decide what it is that we feel are the important things to measure, and whether that's improvement in MCAS, or whether it's graduation numbers, or whatever it is, and then measure ourselves against other people that are doing the best job in those areas. Because graduation rate, as an example, or going on to a 4-year college, is clearly a function, not that Hingham is poor in those areas, but, you know, if you go to Rockland, as an example, I'm not picking on Rockland, my guess is that their 4-year college rate is lower than ours. Although it may, given where they started 5 years ago, they may have shown substantial improvement in that area. So, you know.
Interestingly, there are some
I
new
was just
trends.
curious, the difference in the reports I received from the council department, and what's here, so that's all I was saying.
I don't think it is different, though. I think
Okay.
that it is the same, but it's 4-year and not all kids
Okay.
in post-secondary. And certainly, there are new trends that are coming along in some very affluent communities where kids are deferring college attendance for a year. I think that's going to show up as a new pattern, doing different kinds of things, from simply going off to doing their volunteerism, a year or a project or something, as opposed to going immediately to enroll. So,
Interesting factoid, one of our neighboring communities did not make the top 50, supposedly, whatever that means, but in fact was in the top 5 of getting kids into four-year college. It was Hamilton.
Anything else?
Yeah, you're right.
no.
I would take a motion to adjourn. Second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye, aye, aye.
Aye.